pēc tam varēsiet viņus uzdot. Un, jā, izbaudiet vakaru. Lūdzu, Colin, please, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have that curious thing at the moment where I go around the world and I get introduced to people and I have no idea what they're saying. And then they just go, Dr. Colin Robertson. And I just go, yeah, and step in. So he could have said anything. Hopefully it was all true. But it's a real privilege to be here. And I feel like this has been one of those events that I've been invited along to this whole weekend. It feels like it's been there for a while in the calendar. And I kept thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Latvia in November. And then suddenly then it was like, oh, I'm going to Latvia in about 3 days' time. Okay, let's get organized for Latvia. So I'm going to talk to you all tonight. It's a great audience from my point of view because you all know what we do. You know what it's about. Hopefully, I'm going to take the next 50 minutes. It's like, am I lisping a lot or is it just the mic adding it to it? Maybe it's me. Hopefully, I'm going to just add to your understanding. That would be great because in reality, to be a researcher, to be an informed practitioner, to be an evidence-based practitioner, the key to that, the defining aspect of that, is that we keep learning, that we keep going back and we keep examining the information and our understanding and checking our understanding against what it is that is newly emerging in the area. Because the best part about science is that you can never be wrong. All you can ever do is update your position. So what I mean by that is that for sure, there are times when science has been convinced that this is the best way to do something. And then we found out it's not. And we found out that actually we should have done something else. But that's where the flexibility of science defines what science is about. The reason why I'm pointing that out to you, and I don't say this to be challenging, I certainly don't say it to be controversial, but there are certain products available on the market. There are certain manufacturers of certain different types of things. And what they do is they get behind one core message, and that's where they're going to stay until they've sold as much of whatever it is as possible. And they spend their time actually hoping that you don't find out anything different to what they're telling you. But I think one of the things that separates us, Zinzino, and certainly the reason why I joined, is that we do the exact opposite. We invite everybody in all the time. We encourage people to ask questions. We have a scientific advisory board who are world-leading experts who guide and challenge the ideas that we have and give us best information and evidence from the field as it happens. We continually look at the science. You know, I take it for granted. And as this says, I'm the kind of chief product officer. It's my team, and I'm very, very proud of them. And I take it for granted. But, you know, we have dedicated full-time staff. We have Dr. Emily Gislovic, and her whole role and function within the Zinzino organization is just to look at the research. It's to examine the research, critically evaluate it, look at our product range and go, do the two meet? Are we doing the very best we can by people's approaches to supplemental health through meaningful nutritional supplements? And I think that's really powerful, and I hope that gives people a level of reassurance about our authenticity. And tonight, really, I'm going to go through some of the data that we have with regards to balance oil. I'm going to have a look at the whole notion of why the health protocol matters. And any of you who've heard me speak before, you'll probably be aware that I'm very passionate about the health protocol. And in fact, we were talking just on the short car journey here. And I was asked, well, what products do you take? And I actually had to think. And I should have just said, well, health protocol plus lean shake. But I didn't. I went, well, I take balance oil and I take xenobiotic, and then when I'm traveling, I take Protect, but most days at home, I'll just take at least 2 Extend, and if I've not ate so well that day, I'll take 4 Extend, but then I exercise every day, so I'll have Lean Shake. And I went a long way round to say health protocol plus Lean Shake. But I don't only talk about it and encourage people to use the health protocol. I live by the health protocol. And before I go into the slides and all the rest of it, and I know most of you know because you're in the Zinzino world, but 2.5 years ago at the start of lockdown, I was a researcher working on 2 huge global health projects, health innovations and cities changing diabetes. And the whole reason why I moved across and eventually came to Zinzino isn't because I'm a product person. It's not because I ever dreamt of working in the commercial sector. My move across to Zinzino was consistent with everything I'd ever been working on, which was to change how health is done in the 21st century. And what became apparent to me is everything that I've been talking about, the research that we've been working on, the message we were trying to get to reach people all over the world, there was a vehicle for it, and they were doing it much better than anybody else. Because they weren't just talking about it, they were actually empowering people to do something with it. So that was why I moved across. That's why I'm here now. And even though I still research and I still collaborate with lots of big research institutes and universities, and I'm still involved in that world, this is what I do full time. This is my first priority when I wake up in the morning, and it's the last thing I think about when I go to bed at night. This is why we travel around and we have events like this, so that we can make sure that the most important part, and I mean this, which is all of you, understand it as best as you can, because you're the people who have the powerful conversations. This tonight is important for sure, and it's a huge responsibility for us, and we take it seriously, which is to try and empower you with enough knowledge and understanding so that you can have the really important conversations, which are the ones that you have with your family, your friends, the networks you build, the communities that you live and function within, and the health that you change on a daily basis. I take great pride in that. Paul, you all know Paul. You all know Paul, don't you? I was with Paul in the flesh, in the real world, for the first time 3 weeks ago in Oslo. And we were going there for a meeting, and people found out we were going to be in the same place at the same time, and they quickly put together an event because they knew we were going to be there. And there was a room like this, and they filled it in about 2 hours. And Paul and I did an event together. And Paul hasn't been out and about a lot because of lockdown and various things. And this was his second, he'd just come from Prague. This was his second public speaking in years. And he called everybody in the audience his army. He said, I'm on this mission and I've got this information, but I need an army, and you're my army. I don't think of it quite the same way. I think of it that we're all on the same mission, really. We're all on the same drive. We all want to change things for the better. We want to create a little bit of good in the world. I think we've all probably recognized that the way to do health better is to own your health situation. And you can do that by making better choices. And actually, people want to make a career out of that. And I think that that's incredible, because the world needs people to have a career in doing that, because that's the way you make it spread. So, after all that, and I've still got 45 minutes left because there's a huge clock here telling me, and I will warn you from the start, anyone who's listened to me speak before, I do have a bit of a reputation for going over time, but I'm going to try not to, because I know that's not positive for anyone. I will try and stick to the 45 minutes. So let's give it a go. He says, clicking his first slide after 11 minutes. So at that rate, we're going to be here till midnight. So get comfortable. So there is a phrase in nutrition, and you may have heard me say this before, because I say it a lot. I've said it so much now that other people quote me as saying it. That's always a good thing. You are what you eat. That is true, you are what you eat. But more importantly, you are what you absorb. And the first time I ever made this comment was 5 years ago. And I made that comment off the back of realizing through the research and through practice that the issue people had with their diet wasn't only just based on not getting enough of the nutrients in, having energy high diets and nutritionally low diets, and diets that actually contain components that you wouldn't really want to eat if you knew they were there. That was one part of the problem. But what they didn't realize was that the cost, the impact of that, was that it compromised you from absorbing nutrients when you did have something good. Because people would often say, and remember, yes, I've worked in sport and I've helped people to do the Olympics and rugby and football and climb Everest and all that good stuff. But some of the work I'm most proud of was as a clinical exercise physiologist, and where I was supporting people on a daily basis, helping them to recover from severe illness and disease and trauma and injury, and also helping people to lose weight so that they could have life-saving operations. And it was throughout those experiences of doing one-to-one nutrition consultations and asking people what they eat, what they thought about what they eat, that you realized that people had this crazy idea. And I want you to see how much of this you can connect with. They have this idea of it's okay once in a while. It's okay to do that once in a while. And I say, okay, how often is once in a while? And they say, once or twice a week? That to me is not once in a while. That means you regularly eat and consume foods that way. That's just who you are. That's not once in a while. And then some people will say, well, once a week, we'll do it as a treat. Again, that's not once in a while. You are putting those types of your food into your body on a regular, frequent basis. Once in a while is where something happens maybe once, twice, 3 times a year. That's once in a while. But the concept of once in a while sits in people's heads and they go, oh, it's okay. And then they'll say, oh, but I eat an apple and I'll have some vegetables with a meal. And it dawned on me that what people didn't realize was that when things are weighted to such an extent that this once in a while is pretty much what you do all the time, and that these foods actually hinder you absorbing the apple and the nutrients from some vegetables. What they didn't understand is that you are what you eat. You will look, feel, function how you eat, but you're also what you absorb, and you will only get the nutrients through if you can absorb them. Otherwise, the body will just move them through. And this is a huge problem. The reason why we have such common nutritional deficiencies in the world is a twofold approach. People eating too much of the wrong thing, and then they're not actually able to digest and absorb the good stuff that they may have some of the time. So, we're obviously going to delve into omega-6-3, but there's more to this than that, because we're going to discuss the health protocol. But you'll be aware, this is probably common language to you, omega-6-3 status, we've got a world out of balance. I feel like I have to remind people or tell people this a lot. Zinzino did not invent this problem. Zinzino were not the first people to talk about it at all. Zinzino is a response to the problem. The World Health Organization themselves published an article 3 years ago that said we've got a problem because approximately 6.3 billion people in the world don't have enough essential fats. They have insufficient omega-3. This is a real problem. That was why I got brought in to look at the omega-3s specifically, which was a project I was doing way before I'd ever even heard of Zinzino. Didn't know they existed. So that's really important that we start from there. This is not us trying to talk to the world about something they don't know about. In fact, when I was a child back in the days and growing up in Liverpool and Dublin and the streets I grew up on, my mum, who was from Dublin, and my dad's from a Scottish background, they took cod liver oil capsules They took them every single day. It was called 7 C's, had a very nice name. And they took these capsules every day because they knew that you should take your cod liver oil, that you should have enough omega-3. That was back in the 1970s. The first book I ever read about nutrition that woke my brain up, that made me go, wow, this is fascinating and it's so important, was in 1984. But the book was written in 1972, the year I was born. And the whole book was about the problem the world was going to face if it didn't address the issue around the lack of omega-3s in the diet. So 50 years ago, leading experts and authorities were saying, we've got a problem coming our way. We're struggling to get enough omega-3 in the diet now, and if we don't change things, it's going to be a bigger problem. And the whole book talks about the issue and impact it has on child development, on the issue and impact it has on our immune function, and how we can deal with living in the modern world. 50 years ago. And in fact, if you go into any kind of health shop, if you go into any kind of pharmacist where they have a supplement section, I promise you, they will have a whole shelf, a big area dedicated to omega-3 as a supplement. So we're not convincing anybody that they need to take what's actually classified as an essential fat. The polyunsaturated fatty acids, the PUFAs as we call them, these are the essential fats. On that note, I need to reassure you of something. Zinzino didn't decide, Orion and Hilda and Doug didn't get together and go, you know what, we should call these essential to make it sound more important, and that'll sell more. I've been calling them the essential fats since I did my first degree, which is a long time ago, because that's what we classify them as in nutritional terms. And the reason why they're essential, well, you tell me, why are they essential? You don't produce them. You can only get them through your diet, and it's an integral part of how the system functions. So they're essential. They're not up for debate. You have to have them. So this is important to understand, and we have this huge issue. We're out of balance. What they predicted 50 years ago, the early signs of what they saw, we're living with that now. We have a world that is out of balance in an essential nutrient. Now, typically, and I remember thinking this way, I remember having a conversation with Paul about this, no problem. Just reduce down your omega-6 in your diet and increase your omega-3. Just eat more omega-3. Everyone happy with that? No response? No one's going to answer? Is everyone happy with that? Just reduce how much omega-6 you eat and increase how much omega-3 you eat. Yep. Solution? Great, we're all done then. Go home. Best of luck. Try. I tried for years and years and years. Doesn't get us anywhere. There's lots of reasons why we don't get anywhere. It should be this way. It really should be this way. It should be that simple. We should be able to go, wow, yeah, we just got too much omega-6. We need to increase our omega-3. Let's eat more omega-3, reduce the omega-6, problem solved. It's called being a food-first approach. And I was one of those people. It felt great because it's quite, you feel good about yourself. It's like the right thing to say. Oh, just change your diet. Just eat more fatty fish, eat more salmon, eat more anchovies, eat more tuna, eat more mackerel. Just eat it all 2 or 3 times a day. Reduce all those omega-6 that you're eating. That's what you've got to do. That's sustainable. I look back now and think, was I insane? Not only is it not sustainable, it's just not it's not reality. Trying to get people to eat an apple 2 or 3 times a week continues to be a challenge. And if we look at the real challenges, ecological, there are 7.8 billion people on the planet. So we're going to give them all a fish each every day, maybe twice a day. The whole world will be divided up into the people who fished at nighttime and the people who fished at daytime. And we'd all take turns fishing, and then we go to bed and get up and eat the fish that they caught. That would be And we've got one planet. So how long would it take before there would just be no fish? A week? So it's just not ecologically sustainable. Remember, 100 years ago, there was just about 2 billion people. And now we're rapidly approaching 8 billion. It's a different world. We need to wake up. And as nice as it is to think, well, we'll just go back and live off the land and local and produced, and we should do that where we can, for sure. But we've also got to recognize the limitations of trying to approach this problem that way. Secondly, there's the cost. Because the only one that has a sufficient amount of nutrients in it is not the intensively aquacultured fish, it's the wild, line-caught, fatty fish. That's the one you want. That's the kind of fish you need to eat to get a sufficient amount of nutrients from it. And there's two problems with that. We've already covered one, there's not enough of them. What's the other problem with that? There's those kind of issues, yeah, that's actually a good point. But let's assume that it's organic and it's line caught and you've got this nice picture of someone fishing and they bring it onto the boat and they go, this one's for you. And you're going to have this gorgeous fish. What's the other problem?
Many people don't eat fish or
That's true. That not only they don't like it, most people can't afford that. The cost of that every day. And then for sure, and that's a really good point, and that builds on a point I'm going to make in a moment, is that taste buds have changed. People just don't like it. And humans are funny. Humans are really funny. They're not very rational. They're really not. And when they don't like something, they're like, no, don't like it. So they just don't do it. So there's a lot of challenges about trying to get this through your diet. There are a lot of challenges. And so you have to think a different way. And if I go back again to April 2020, writing this report, which I've been asked to do, to say, well, how do we fix this problem of omega-3? My initial thing was like, well, we'll just get a supplement, because we can't do it this way or this way. But I'll come back to that in a moment. Because it kind of is the solution, but it's got to be the right solution. This is the real food pyramid. You'll see, if you have a look at your government, I love looking at this. I love looking, before I go somewhere and I look at home, what people say is the food pyramid and the food plate. And it's just like a work of fiction. It's romanticized. Here's how it should be. It's great. And that's why I call this slide the real food pyramid. Because this is how people really eat all across the world versus what these nice guidelines look like. So we see that ultra-processed foods occupy around about 60% of everything we consume. And then we have the lower level processed foods, we have the culinary ingredients, and then we have the minimally processed at the top. Most of what in fact, it's anywhere up to 80-85% of what we consume has been through some level of processing. The term processed itself, we use it negatively when we shouldn't really. We should be really clear about what type of processing we're talking about. And it's the ultra processed. And it's those kind of typically processed foods here. These are the real problem ones. And depending on the mood I'm in, I have a different take when I'm talking to people about them. My own personal take on these things is that I wouldn't consume these for all the money in the world. I wouldn't even go near them. They don't even register on my list of possibilities. If I'm going through an airport at 3 o'clock in the morning and the only one that's open is this, that's okay. I'll be hungry till tomorrow. I can live a day. I'm not prepared to do it. But for you, you've got to find out where your range and your balance is. It's got to be what matters to you and how sensitive you are and your attitude to how you want to live life. This stuff here, remember that once in a while, less frequently, you're going to be okay. Again here, not awful at all. We can tolerate lots of that good stuff. Something like extra virgin olive oil has been processed to a certain degree. That's all good. That's okay. And then we want to make sure that the minimally and non-processed take up more and more of our diet. But the fact is it doesn't. And even I would imagine if I was to do a one-to-one nutrition consultation with you and I gave you a pill that made you only tell the truth, not that I'm saying you'd lie, most humans do. we would find out that actually you eat across the full range. Most people do. And that's normal and that's okay. We shouldn't be too judgmental. But when we talk about, and I'll come to this in a moment, the health protocol being the antidote, which is deliberately provocative. We use a strong term for it. The reason being is that we just put in all the stuff that this doesn't give you. So we just take the approach of going, all of this is missing, so we'll just put it all in for you. We'll just give you all the stuff to have that your food is missing. And that will improve your status. Because this is how most people eat. This is why years ago, I stopped telling people what not to eat. Didn't get anywhere. Because when you're doing the consultation and they're sat in front of the doctor and I say, you shouldn't do this, they go, yeah, shouldn't do it. And then they walk out and go, he told me not to do this. Yeah. How did you get on when you saw that nutrition guy? Oh, it was terrible. Told me to eat loads of boring food and none of the stuff that gives me joy. So our approach is let's just put the good stuff in, because this is the problem that we face. So let's have a look at some data, and we're going to delve into it now. I mentioned it a moment ago, supplementation should be the key. We can't get 7.8 billion fish out of the sea every single day. Ecologically, it's unethical, it's unecological, it's unrealistic. To do it in the way that would give you a sufficient amount of nutrition is impossible, would cost a fortune, and as that gentleman over there said, taste buds have changed. In fact, let me just go back a second, I'll put this back. The impact of this is not just what it's done direct to your health, it's changed this. It's changed how you think about food. It's changed taste orientation. We live in a world now where there are people who genuinely think that foods that are really, really good for them don't taste great, whilst foods that are willfully causing them harm taste amazing. That's crazy when you think about it, isn't it? It's crazy, isn't it? Food's addictive. And we always take addiction seriously. But when it comes to food, we just say, oh, don't worry, it's okay. You know, we won't talk about the addiction side of it. If somebody's got a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, then we take that really seriously. But if it's food, we just make a TV show out of it. So we need to take an approach through supplementation. That's the way to do it. And we can. We actually have a really good system for doing this. And I will consistently hear from people, and this was the first type of, not this, but a page I'll arrive at in a moment was some of the first data I looked at. Because you go, okay, people need more omega-3. We can't do it through giving everybody fish. We'll use the supplementation because that industry already exists. My mum was taking it when I was a child. Let's do it that way. And now in my position, I regularly meet people who go, no, I don't need to take this one. I take an omega-3. I'm really, really happy with it. I like it. It's cheaper than yours. That's what I take. I know it's the best because on the box it says it's the best. That's the one for me. Great. Take the test. Let's test your status. How well is it working out for you? Because, I'm a researcher, so I want to test everything anyway. I'm hardwired to go, well, is that real? Can we measure that? Did it really happen? And so I think that we're in a position in the world where test-based nutrition makes sense, because why would you alter or change anything if there's no reason to do it? You take what you call a circumstantial analysis. You have a look at where things are and see what you need to change. And so because we have the world's single biggest database of this type, which is now rapidly approaching 900,000 independently analyzed and verified samples, we are now on the threshold of big data. It can't actually tell us anything new. And the reason why I have to go back to 2020, because we're publishing this data. Emily and Paul and Professor Angela Rizzo from the Milan Institute, they are collaborating on 3 research papers. So the very latest data I can't share because that's going to go through the peer review. But I promise you, it looks exactly like this. This is up until 2020. And what we see is the average omega-3 ratio for someone taking a standard, someone not taking anything, no omega-3, is 14.8 to 1. Right, folks, just to check you're all awake and with me, what should the ratio be? 3 to 1, less than 4 to 1. 3 to 1, less than 3 to 1, we're in a good place. So someone who's not taken an omega we see 14.8 to 1. The problem with this, increased reliance on fast food, decreased presence of fatty fish in the diet, and omega-6 everywhere. It's in processed foods, it's in the primary choice of oils that people use. We have so much access to omega-6. So this is the problem, and this is the outcome, 14.8. This is not a great place to be. I'll explain that in a moment. Now, these are our people using a standard omega-3 supplement. And I shouldn't really have that there, it's not about this company, it's about any other company, okay? What you see here, again, from the same database, we see, well, the average score is 9.91 when they take another omega-3 supplement. So how do you feel about that? It's better. Yeah? Happy with it? Good? I see people going, yeah. Good? Yeah? No, people, I don't know. Remember, I've taught at universities for over 20 years, rooms full of students. I know what it's like when you ask a question. No one wants to be the person who commits and says something because they don't want the professor to go, no, you're totally wrong, and everyone to laugh at them. That's not going to happen. This is a safe space. You are all well informed in this area, so I genuinely want to ask you all a question. 14.8 for someone who doesn't take anything. 9.9 to 1 for someone who uses a standard omega-3 supplement. Are we happy that's a good outcome? No. Sorry?
It's even worse. They pay a lot of money and don't get the results.
I like your thinking. I think this is terrible. Because it's okay, let's be honest. That is better than that. And often, when people get their scores, they'll say, oh, well, my husband's score was 18 to 1, and mine was 16 to 1, so it was better. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. They're both terrible. Like, you're better than him, but that's arbitrary. It doesn't mean anything. This for sure is better than that. And if you said to me, you've only got two options, you can be this one or this one, I go, yeah, I'll be this one. But the way I can best explain this is, imagine you're on a field, there's a set of goalposts, soccer goalposts, and you and I are going to go against each other, okay? And the one who kicks the ball and gets the ball in the net gets €100. No, €1,000,000. Yeah? To make it worthwhile. And so I kick it, and it goes flying off into the corner of the field. So no €1,000,000 for me. Yep. Then you kick it, and it goes off, and it's outside the goalpost. It's way closer than mine, but it's not in the net. So you don't get €1,000,000 either. In fact, it's more frustrating for you. You were closer. You're like, God, so close. I was miles off. You were so close. But there's still no goal. You're not where you need to be. This doesn't get you the health benefit. This doesn't put you in the place that you need to be. It's better than that, but so what? It's not a meaningful difference. It's better than something that's bad. That's all it is. And so often when people say, I take another supplement and I'm really happy with it, it's the blessed one, blah, 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 great, do the test. See how it's working out for you. And I've yet to see anybody, and there's nearly 900,000 samples in the database, I've yet to see anybody personally, through the people that I speak with, and just recently there was a Premiership footballer, him and his nutritionist, he'd signed to a new club, and he was like, no, I use an omega-3, I want this one. The rest of the team all take balance oil. They all did their 4-monthly check. He took a test because everyone else was. The rest of the squad were all less than 3 to 1. He was 17 to 1. On his, mine's the best, this is the one I use, my nutritionist tells me to take it. He quickly said, I'll tell you what, I'll take balance oil instead. Because take a test. See how it's working out for you. Because people will sometimes say, balance oil is quite expensive. And I go, it's way cheaper than eating really fresh, wild-caught fish every single day. And do you know what's really, really expensive? Is taking a supplement and a product that doesn't make any difference. That's like the worst hobby in the world, isn't it? Why not just throw money out the car window? It's not doing anything. It's not doing anything worthwhile. That's a really expensive habit. So, I told you a moment ago there was a problem with the research, not the research, there was a problem with the products. And again, if we go back to April 2020, when I'm writing this report, and I've been tasked to go, what's the solution? How do we increase the amount of omega-3 in the diet? And as a researcher, the first thing I do is look at the research. And I thought, well, I remember, omega-3 supplementation. I'd worked in sport. We use omega-3 supplementation in sport everywhere. So I thought, I'll go and have a look and see how the evidence stacks up. And I found this report. This is a Cochrane meta-analysis systematic review. This is really high-impact scientific evaluation, statistical analysis. So these guide what we do and how we think about things. This was published in 2018. 112,000 people across 79 trials that met the standard required for it to be meaningful, impactful research. And the summary was there is little or no effect of omega-3 supplements. They just don't work. I've showed you our data. We know they don't work. Cochrane Review published this data in 2018, so they don't work. Don't make any difference. So this is not new knowledge. This isn't owned knowledge. This isn't like a marketing campaign on, we're not just going out and saying this stuff. This is the reality of the situation that there is. We know it's a real problem. We know it's difficult to fix. We know the most effective way to fix it will be with a supplement, but the supplements don't work. So that swings you right back round. Now, genuinely, I'm a scientist. I don't really believe in much other than what you can measure. But some people believe in fate. And I was sat, it was gorgeous. The lockdown one was my favorite lockdown because the weather was lovely. And I was at home. And I didn't have to commute to Manchester and back every day, which was 120 miles a day commuting. I was enjoying lockdown one up until this point, because I was writing this paper and my conclusion was going to be, there's no viable solution. We can't fix this. This is not something we can address. We can't tell people this is what you need to do. Or we can't tell them anything new. And it's going to be that sociological economic divide. The people who are well off eat really good quality fish where you can, and everybody else, there's not really many options of anything that works. Now, this is where the fate bit comes in, if you're so inclined to believe in it, because a good friend of mine, who at that time was really high up in Under Armour, the American clothing brand, we'd known each other for years, and he'd had a few health problems, and he was the person who rung me up. And normally, when I'm working on something, as you'll testify, I'm not the quickest person at replying to messages. I'm really not, and you've actually seen it in action. So we enjoyed the meal together earlier on, and as I sat down, the 20 messages that have been coming my way all day, I thought, right, I'll go through them now. So there's people who've waited hours. I'm not great with messages. And if I'm working on something, I'm just working on it. Messages can wait later. If it's an emergency, they'll call. No one ever messages you to say the house is on fire. You know what I mean? That's not the route. But I was so kind of in that moment of going, what do I do? Tony rang, I'll answer the phone. He said, Colin, I swear to you this is true. Colin, what do you know about omega-3s? I said, funnily enough, Tony, I know quite a lot at the moment about omega-3. He said, great. He said, have you ever heard of a company called Zinzino? I said, no, never heard of them. I said, but if they are making a omega-3 supplement, it'll be rubbish, because they're all rubbish. I'm just writing this review on it, so don't touch it. And he said to me, he said, well, actually, he said, you're right. He said, because my doctor in America has told me the same thing. He said, supplements don't work. But this one company who are from Scandinavia somewhere, they've got one that works, and he wants me to take it. He said, but I've told him that if it's anything to do with nutrition, you're my go-to guy. If you tell me it's rubbish, I won't take it. If you tell me it's good, then I'll start taking it. So I swear to you, this is how it all happened. And normally, can you imagine how many people ask me this kind of stuff on a weekly basis. I haven't got time for it. But because it was Tony, and because I didn't want to finish writing this article, if I'm honest with you, I thought I'll take 10 minutes and have a look. And for me, you're lucky in what we do in research if anything ever comes your way that gives you that moment's clarity. And you go, oh, that's it. You're really lucky if it ever happens. And I've got friends who work at CERN, like physicists, like really good friends of mine. You spend your life hoping it will happen. And I remember to this day, bringing the web page up, going, yeah, take a test, everything will be terrible, take the wonder product and everything will be fixed. And I thought, I'm not going to read any of that, I'm just going to look at this product. And I went, oh, that's genius. And because you bear in mind, I'd spent weeks immersed in this research. At that point, my brain was brimming over with information about omegas, not just 3, 6, 9, 7, the whole hit. And the moment of genius and clarity was the polyphenol. They'd rebound the fish oil to a polyphenol, which protects it, is pro-anti-inflammatory. And I was like, why didn't I think of this? Genuinely, why didn't I think of it? Make it, sell it, and be having this conversation as a multi-millionaire. Like, why didn't I think of this? I'm meant to be clever. And so that was right, even though I'd read all this, and I started to go through, and there's a lot of papers, and I've never talked about this before, but the truth is what I actually did is all the papers that this reviewed, I accessed them all. And I thought, right, I'm going to see what was the product they use, what was the product type. Not one of them had a polyphenol bound to the omega-3. They were all standard, over-the-counter, typically derived fish oil. And I was going, every time, it doesn't work. And so that was what piqued my interest, and then we haven't got time for the rest of the story, but then when I realized that Vitas did all the independent analysis, that was what convinced me. And for those of you who don't know, maybe you still don't know, but Vitas is one of the most highly respected independent laboratories in the world. They partner with Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, Harvard, the British NHS system. They do tons of their analysis and research for them. They're a powerhouse of what they do. So then I realized the test was real, the product was real, and I started to see things in the way that I see them now, but even more so because I'm closer to the data. So I want to draw your attention to this because this is actually data that's pretty much up to date. It's certainly up to this year, and this is with regards to your omega level or index. Because we talk a lot about the ratio, so how much omega-6 there is to omega-3, and that's important. But across the literature, if you go and look at the research, most of what we discuss is actually this level. And you may know this, if you're above 8% total fats omega-3, you're in a good place. That's kind of where you want to be. That means you're in a anti-inflammatory, non-inflammatory state. And then when you are beneath this as a total, then you're in this kind of amber, yellow area into the pro. Our database and research from around the world tells us that most people, when assessed, are less than 4. There's been a lot of work that has assessed elite athletes, so Olympians, Premiership footballers, professional athletes. Where do you think they come out as? What kind of score do you think they have? It's a tiny but meaningless bit better. They come out of 4.4. So for the general population, just less than 4 in this zone. The best of the best human examples, sports, but I know why. They're about here. See this white line? And the reason being is they engage in activity every single day, exercise, training, competition, that upregulates their pro-inflammatory markers. That's what you have to do to adapt and improve. But they're also hugely deficient in omega-3. So the recovery mechanism is not in place. But this is what we see. But one of the powerful things that we see, and when I first had the opportunity to look at the Zinzino database, what I was most interested in, I got to the ratio second, I was interested in this. How many people, when they take the product for that 120 days-ish, get to the right level? And what we see consistently is that the vast majority of people, in fact, currently the statistics on this level alone are around about 96, 97% of the people just in the first 120 days. And then for those who don't, the longer you stay on the product, you get in there. I'm going to be honest with you now. I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to update if you do or think you do. The number you're really looking for that I want you to aim at is 10%. 8% is the threshold. Imagine now we're at a cliff edge and there's a 500-meter drop. And I go, you're safe even if you're right on the edge. You're safe. Or do you want to stand there? I think most people, that might be exciting for a minute, but most people want to stand here. And you want to be around about 10%. This puts you, because there will be a little bit of variation. That's just natural. The body is constantly in a dynamic state of homeostasis, equilibrium, but you want to aim around about 10. But one of the most compelling parts of the data for me is that we do that most of the time. So back to this. The big hit home information. So we've got 14.8 if you don't do anything. 9.9 if you're going to insist on wasting money on something that doesn't work. And then balance oil, second test, where we see above 96% of people get 2.8 to 1 in that initial 120 to 130 days. That's why we need to publish the data, because the data has to be out there to tell the world through the peer review, through the scientific community, that we can actually do this. But we can share the information and the evidence as it is, because it's independently analyzed, verified. We do it in a really rigorous way. We know what it is we're assessing and counting. This is the only meaningful change there is. This gets you in a position that matters. This is a part of what gets you into this non-inflammatory zone, is that when you're in the right ratio, which is here. And that's where one of us actually hit the ball straight down the middle, back of the net, take the £1 million. That's when you can go home with it. So, the test is important for two reasons. One, it enables you, the individual, to see where you are and determine how much of a change you need to make. If you're taking another type of product, you can verifiably assess, is it making any kind of difference? But the test is also important because you're contributing to a growing database, which means we can better inform the world of our health. So it's more than you. It starts with you. You're really important. It's about you making decisions about your health. But all of this enables us to tell the world a better piece of information. You can actually change this. We can actually act on this. We can actually improve it. So every test matters. It really does. So how does it get you into balance? I think most of you know, but let's just recap. Quality is everything. It is a premium quality. You know, we've just been away. We've had a whole strategy week. All the management team, all the regional sales directors, Orion, Hilda, Doug, the CEO, everyone. We've been together for an intensive week going through absolutely everything we do. Let's get real. What we have is quite a premium product. But unless we make it that way, it doesn't work the way it needs to work. So that's just what we have to do. Because it's not about bottom line and just selling lots and lots of something. It's about changing health on a global scale. And this is the way we do it. And these Pequal olives, pre-harvested, cold-pressed, you know, they are packed with polyphenols, way more than the average virgin olive oil. So it's got a high density polyphenol active, protects the omega-3. So first of all, there is not a doctor in the world now that doesn't recommend people to take a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil every day, pro-anti-inflammatory, really good for you. They say that. So it acts, it's active. But from us, it protects the omega-3 in the bottle. It protects the omega-3 from the air. It protects the omega-3 the minute you ingest it. It survives the first pass. It gets to go through that absorptive process and be active at a cellular level. And that enables the omega-3 to work and function as it should within the cell and to itself be pro-anti-inflammatory. So that's it. We tell everyone what it is. We're not holding anything back. We're not pretending it's a secret. We tell everyone how we do it. So it's the oil, the polyphenols, protect the omega-3 from oxidation and carries it all the way into the cell membrane. And this is why, and I'm looking at the clock, I've got 5 minutes left. Let's see if this happens. I mean, we can steal a little bit of time from Q&A, is what I'm thinking at this stage, but let's go for it. So the reason why I stopped saying to people, stop eating this and don't do that and take all the joy out of your life by not doing that anymore, it didn't work. No one listens. Humans aren't rational. If they were, they wouldn't fall in love. It's just a fact. We're not rational, okay? And also, processed foods are hardwired for addictive properties. They have what's called bliss point technology. They play off the dopamine cycle. They know how to get you addicted, and they've manipulated your taste buds into loving them and craving them. There's a certain product, type of potato chips, that once you pop, you just can't stop, and people eat a whole tube of these things. Nutrition zero, taste awful, but people get addicted, awful stuff. So me saying to you, yeah, stop all that, just doesn't happen. And you will have noticed that when people talk about comfort food, it's very rare that they've had a tough day at work or they've had their heart broken and they go home and go, that's it, I'm just going to sit on the couch and eat carrots. Doesn't happen, does it? I'm going to make myself feel good with some broccoli and a glass of water. I'm going to have a sip of water, though. So people don't do that. They go to the freezer and they take out the ice cream, don't they? And they go into the cupboards and they get the chocolate biscuits because these trigger the dopamine and then we feel better. We physiologically feel better. And so I thought, I'm never going to win. That's not going to win. And actually, the outcome I want is just to improve your health. That's what I want. And so I started to go around the world and talk about this add before you subtract. So before I take anything away from you, I'm just going to put really good stuff in. And I used to say to people on a one-to-one, I go, I don't care what you do this week, but 3 times I want you to add blueberries to something. It could be your breakfast, it could be your yogurt. And then the week later I'd say, right, this week I want you to keep adding the blueberries, but I also want you to put some watercress with a salad 3 times a week. And I want you to add some walnuts. And I used to just build up by getting them to add good foods, epigenetic foods, foods that change your genetic expression. Well, the beauty of the health protocol is that we can do that really easily, actually cost effectively, and we can bring about a more seismic change. Because if you want to change behavior, you have to change thinking. And as we know, omega-3 plays a huge part in cognitive function. 60% of your brain is fat. 20% of that fat is DHA. Guess what happens if you're insufficient in DHA? There's a compromise to your cognitive function. We see this in child development. This is why pregnant women should supplement with omega-3. This is why your child, early years, should be making sure it has sufficient omega-3. It's a key part of its development. We popped out of the gloop 6 million years ago, 350,000 years in our current form. That's our evolutionary track. We haven't left this behind yet. It's an integral part of who and what we are. And so what we do is we balance, we restore, and we boost. But before we go any further, we don't boost your immune system. We boost the amount of nutrients that we have so that you can support a normally functioning immune system. That's really important. There are approximately 37 trillion cells in the human body. It's what you're made of. That's who you are. If you're not right at a cellular level, you're not right at any level, because this is the stuff you're made of. I'm going to let you into a little biochemical, physiological fact. We don't really know how they work. That's the truth. We're learning all the time, and we're learning more and more, but we don't really know how they work. There's key bits that we do understand. One of the primary bits that we definitely understand is that you need the right environment for the cell to function optimally. And the omega-6-3 ratio is a part of creating the right physiological, biochemical environment. That's what you need to think of. A bit like if you think of the tropical rainforests and you think of, you know, the great vistas of Africa where there's like a density and variety of wildlife and multiple ecological systems, and we know that the environmental conditions are vital to the survival and thrival of that ecosystem. It's the same for us. If this isn't right, we don't thrive. We barely survive. 37 trillion cells. And the ratio of these matters across it all. They have to be in balance, and the balance is less than 3 to 1 to make sure that you are right at a cellular level. That's it. Very simple. Make sure you have a sufficient amount of omega-3 on a daily basis that puts you above 8%, ideally 10% total fat omega-3, which brings about less than 3 to 1 as a ratio in the cell. Job done. That's what we need. Now, we're going to delve into your stomach, one of my favorite places. Anyone who's been paying attention, let's do the math. There are 100 trillion bacteria. Now then, how many cells did you have? 37 trillion. How many bacteria do you have? So you are just a host for other life. That's all you are. You're just someone else's planet. Those bacteria are in there going, what's it all about? What's the meaning of life? What's out there? What is this thing we live in? 100 trillion bacteria. 70% of your immune system exists within the gut. The gut microbiota, the microbiome, is rich, diverse. It is like a tropical rainforest. And if you don't feed the bacteria, they can't thrive, they can't survive, and they can't do what they need to do, which is enable the normal functioning of your immune system, and also enable the digestion so that you can absorb nutrients. If the foods you consume kill them or don't feed them, you are willfully working against your own health. Some people don't like to say that. Some colleagues of mine would criticize it, saying that it's too sensational to say that. It's just the truth to say that. That's the fact. It's not sensational. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's really good science. If you don't feed them, guess what? They die. It's not radical, is it? The other one, and I'm not anti-probiotic. I actually think probiotics have got an important part in the nutritional pathway. And we think about this at Zinzino. But what's the point in adding bacteria to your stomach every single day if you're not going to feed them either? So you don't feed the bacteria your body produces, so you just put some other stuff in, don't feed them, so what do you think happens to them? They just die as well. Yeah? Imagine having a fish tank, and you've got a fish in there and he dies, and you go, that's a shame. I'll leave him there, and I'll add some more in, but I'll just do what I was doing before. They've all dead as well. Well, I'll just put some more in. Doesn't make sense. You wouldn't do that, would you? You'd be crazy to do that, or psychotic. So what we do is we feed it. We know for a fact that most people in the world have insufficient amount of dietary fibers. Why? Because they largely eat processed, ultra-processed, and highly processed foods. So we put in those essential dietary fibers. And for those of you who don't know, and I've only become aware of this recently, if you are dealing with pre-diabetes, or if you think you're on that way, actually don't take xenobiotic in one go in the morning. But before you have a meal, just take half a scoop. Take half a scoop, then have your meal. It's going to control your insulin spike because it controls blood sugar response. Promotes gut health. We feed all that bacteria. Balances your cholesterol, healthy bowel function, balanced biome. This is how you absorb nutrients better. It's a key product. And then we get into this now. Vitamins and minerals are how your body communicates. They are the language of your body. So imagine now I asked you all to write me the autobiography of your life. I want to know everything, all the good stuff. The times you fell in love, the biggest arguments you've had, the biggest successes, the biggest losses, the things that scare you, the things that drive you. But you're not allowed to use any words that have the letter A in, B in, C, D, E, K, Z. You can see where this is going. How good's your book going to be? How much are you going to be able to tell me? Well, think about that. Your body communicates biochemically. If certain nutrients aren't there, there's a gap in information, and that leads to a breakdown in the immune function. And so what we do is we boost the amount of nutrients that are available. That's it. We make sure there is enough on a daily basis. If we know that cellularly you're balanced, if we know if the gut is primed to absorb, and then there is a ton of the right amount of vitamins and minerals that your body thrives off and plays a part in every single process the body has to do, then we've added before we've subtracted. We've already advanced your health status. And the key thing after this is once you start to get these things right, you empower people to start to think differently because they feel differently. And when they feel differently and think differently, they start to act differently. And then the elimination of things that aren't really contributing positively towards your diet, you're in a stronger place to do something about them. And I see it all the time, and I hear it all the time. I see it in practice, and I hear it when I'm at events and all the rest of it, people who will say where it started. It might be for them that the start of the journey was just taking balance oil. And then they go, and now, a year down the road, 2 years down the road, I'm doing this, and it changes. Outlooks change, behavior changes. It's hard to do that when you're still just trying to quit the things you're addicted to. And within, if you take 4 capsules, we did a lot of work on this, and we didn't actually believe it. So we did it again and again and again. And we kind of whispered that we estimated that the amount of nutrients that was in 4 capsules was equivalent to around about 3,000 kcals worth of the most nutrient-dense food you could eat in a day. And you all know Orion. You got excited about that. He said, well, we need to tell people. We're like, well, let's just double check. Let us double check. And Orion's like, no, just tell them. We've got to tell everyone. But we double checked and we triple checked, and it's true. If you look at that, what you would have to, like looking at a normal dietary behavior, the amount of food, you'd have to be consuming around about 3,000 kcals worth of nutrient-dense food to get the same nutrients that you get from 4 tablets. So, we put plenty in to enable you to support the body's essential communication pathway. Every single process relies on those vitamins and minerals. And that's why it is provocative. It is a provocative statement to say that it's the antidote. Because antidotes typically, you get bitten by a snake and you're going to die, and we give you the antidote and you stay alive. But I think it's the antidote to the modern diet, which is nutritionally poor, energy high. It actually has, and I don't want to get down this road really, but there are components in lots of food that actually proactively cause damage to the gut space. And so a way to provide the opposite solution is to balance out those cells, to get that right. That's what you're made of. To restore the gut. The gut enables everything else to take place. It means that you can get the nutrients from your apple, your pear, your vegetables, and everything else that you eat. And then boost the amount of vitamins and minerals you have on a daily basis to keep the process, to keep the system doing what it is that it needs to do. That said, time's up for 5 minutes. But time is up. Thank you very much. So there are some questions that I'm going to go through.
How we would prefer, start the questions from here or start with questions what you have sent?
Ivar, lūdzu, paņem mikrofonu.
What was the answer?
Take a microphone. We will start. Sākam ar tiem jautājumiem, kuri bija iesūtīti, vai sākam ar jautājumiem no zāles? Ok. Tad sākam ar tiem jautājumiem, kas bija šeit. A person who had inefficiency of omega-3 came to the green zone and according to the analysis has excess of omega-3, 20 to 30%. How does an excess of omega-3 affect health? Is it needed to reduce the dosage of balance oil?
So, thankfully, this doesn't come up a lot, but it does come up once in a while. And I think a part of this comes down to the notion that people go, well, if that's really good, then I'm going to take lots of it. Because if the more I have, then the better it'll be for me. And that's just not the case. It's about having enough to strike the balance. Omega-6 is vital, okay? You need to have an inflammatory response. Why do you need to have an inflammatory response? Well, if you cut your finger, if you trip on a step, if you break a bone, if you get a cough or a cold or a virus, if you do exercise, your body needs to respond with a pro-inflammatory response. This upregulates the immune function in order to bring about the repair. So you have to have the ratio right, which is less than 3-to-1. Now, if you inverse the relationship so that there's actually more omega-3 than there is 6, then actually you've lost the pro-inflammatory response. That's not good. That's not safe. That should not be encouraged at all, because that omega-6, that pro-inflammatory response is vital to your survival when you're under stress, when the body's having to adapt and recover and repair. So yes, you can have too much. And I see this a lot, and particularly it's been a reoccurring theme just lately in sport, because the athletes, we've got more and more athletes using our products now, and because doing this takes 10 seconds, they go, and then put the bottle down. And you say, so how much do you take? Don't know. How much were you told to take? 15 mil. But you took a mouthful. So you think your mouth is 15 mil? Yeah? And they take too much. And so, yeah, you should really, I always encourage people to build up from the lowest recommendation. The lowest recommendation is 0.15 mil per kilogram your own mass. And do that for 120 days and test it and see what change there is. And if you don't get the change you expect, which bear in mind, I've shown you the evidence most people do, then take it up a little bit more, increase it a little bit. Something else that you might want to do, and I encourage people to do, it could be most of you, I would imagine, will take that 0.15 mil per kilogram and get into balance. Now, that doesn't mean you'll stay in balance, because if there's been a deficiency, your body's really good at going, brilliant, we finally got it, I'm bringing it in and putting it to good use. And then what will happen is the body will reassess, readjust itself, and it could be that you need to start taking 0.17. You might need to take a little bit more to stay there. Some people you won't. For some people, particularly the sports people, they start at 0.2 and they get into balance. And they might be able to back off a little bit. In fact, in some of the sports clubs, whether it's around training or competition, we assess more regularly, because if they're doing really intense, high-volume training, then we increase it a bit more because there's more of a demand. And then when they're in an off period, we decrease it because they don't need so much. The body's not under as much stress. So for ourselves, normal people, I always say the minimum that you should do is stick to the basic guideline, get into balance. I would encourage people to do a second test around about 4 to 5 months later, see if you're maintaining, and then as a minimum, unless there's a dramatic change in your life, just check it once a year. Just check that everything's where it needs to be. But if there is a dramatic change in your life, if you suddenly decide you need to run a marathon, then because you're going to be doing more exercise, training more, if your job becomes more stressful, if there's been changes to your diet, then you might want to test and just make sure that you're still where you need to be.
Thank you. Why is exactly an analysis of fatty acids taken for checking the inflammation? If there is inflammation in a body or other disorders, there are many other tests that detect the inflammation in the body, such as analysis of organic and amino acids.
Is the person who asked this question in the room?
It's from my partner.
Is it from your partner? What does your partner do?
She's nutritionist.
Okay, because I spent my life in academics. I'm surrounded by professors and researchers and all the rest of it. And there's a thing amongst academics, there's an old saying that we don't have conversations, we just wait to speak. So when everyone's in a room and they're there to discuss something, they don't discuss. They just wait. They go, now it's my time to talk and listen to me. And another thing that academics do and scientists and researchers do, and I've been guilty of this, I'll go, that's amazing. Why didn't you do it this way? Why not do it that way? Why not do it that way? We could have done it this way. It's like, yeah, that's a legitimate question. When you're crossing the road, you could go that way. You could go that way and that way. You might see more, might have a better view. You know, there's always an option to do something differently. But with regards to the test, it's really clever actually, because what it is it's a report of your fatty acid profile. So it's telling you your total amount of fat across those 11 essential fatty acids. So it's as a total. There's no estimation. It's not done as a sample ratio. It's literally, we take the blood, measure it as a total volume, and say, there you go. There's your total bloods from that red blood cell count. And it's not, for that reason, it's not what we call a homeostatic measure. So unless you were to do something crazy that day, like eat 10 fish, you're not going to influence it. Unless you were to take your balance oil and then literally an hour later do it, you're not, I mean, that wouldn't influence it too much either. It's not a homeostatic measure. Now, something like a CRP, which is a C-reactive protein test, that's a common test for an inflammatory marker. But what that'll tell me is what you've done today. Have you done any exercise? Have you got a cough or a cold or a flu? And the CRP will tell me that. But it's not going to tell me anything about how you are generally. It doesn't give me any kind of total amount when it comes to a notion of your inflammatory status. And the one that was recommended here, because typically when these questions, someone goes, why didn't you do this one? So the one that was recommended here was analysis of organic and amino acids. So an amino acid is a protein. So it's like, therefore, we would look at the protein behavior and we go into the levels of proteomics, look at a protein behavior. But protein behaviors don't actually influence the cellular ratio of 6:3. So for sure, it'll give me an indication of an inflammatory marker, but in itself, it's still what we call homeostatic. I could influence it that day. It doesn't tell me about your general status. And so what we get by looking at the evidence as it is, and this is also important, by looking at total amounts, taking a non-homeostatic measure, total amounts, this is how it actually is. And unless you change, because cells just replicate, unless you change what you do, you'll get the same or a similar batch in another 120 days. You have to actively change what happens to the cell. You've got to fuel it differently. You've got to make sure there's a sufficient amount of omega-3 so that it can start to occupy the cellular space and bring about the cellular change. You see, that takes time. Most people report that they start to experience a benefit in a week or two. In reality, it's probably more like a month before something biochemical, physiological has taken place. And also, we want to take part in the global conversation about health. And the research in the area that's looking at how we control inflammation, whether you call it systemic, chronic inflammation, whatever you want to call it, centers on two key components: index, total amount, and the ratio. That's where the conversation is. So every time you take a measure that is away from where the conversation is, you're putting yourself outside the debate. That's not where the science is. And the science is there for a good reason, because that data is less susceptible to change. And we know what happens around here if that's not where it should be. So that's why we use that test. The other thing, and this is really practical, and anyone who's listening online, if you're recording this, and for everyone here, there has to be a practicality to science, because we enable people all over the world to take the test at home through a reliable, verifiable measure that we can analyze with integrity and get a good result from. The minute you start looking at things like CRP and you start to look at amino acid profiling, I have to pretty much bring you into the lab to do that. Now, to date, we've got nearly 900,000 samples from all over the world. So imagine that. Zinzino, test-based nutrition, book your flight, come to Norway, book in. We can see you on the 32nd of July, 2031, because we've got 1 million people ahead of you in the queue. And you're going to come in, and we're going to go into this environment, and we'll take this blood, and then we'll take that test, and you can have your... The people go, yeah, I think I'll just keep taking this, thanks. So it's got to be a mechanism and a test that we can make happen all over the world. So you've got to look at practical things as well. That's really important. But it's a great question. It's a very typical academic question. It's the kind of stuff I ask other people. And it's good to go, well, why not? But that's why. We know we've got something that's really reliable, valid, repeatable, and it gives us more than what's happened just that day. It gives us an insight to your status.
Where do so many deep-sea clean fish from Zimzino oils come from? How is the fish oil purified from lead and other impurities?
So this is a process question. So most of our fish, so we use this big company called Lisi, and our fish is all Friends of the Sea certified, so it meets with the highest ethical standards of fishing that exist right now. We're actually one of a few people who put a bigger expectation on the industry at large. We ask more questions about the nature of how it's done. Friends of the Sea certification is currently the gold standard, but we think things could be done better than that. So we ask a lot of questions about how it's sourced, the nature of what happens and what's put back into the sea. Most of it comes from deep out in the Atlantic, deep sea. Most of it comes from certain types of fish that are available in certain types of water at that time. So there's a lot that comes from anchovy and these kind of fish. And the purification process, literally, so they take the fish and then they go through. It all has to be certified and verified so that those totox values are, if you have a look, and we've actually started to make this data available, our totox values, our contamination values are so low, not only compared to an industry, but as a standard. That, I said, why don't we tell everyone? Because people ask about it, we should show everyone how good our levels are, because it's so low. And basically there's a fish oil processing industry that is at large. There are varying standards of it, and we just make sure that we invest in the one that's of the highest possible standard. To eliminate all that, so what we've got at source is the purest type of fish oil, plus our own unique ratio that we look at between the EPA and the DHA, and then it goes off to our own in-house. Remember the blending, where we actually combine that with the olive oil. We do that ourselves, I found. We manage that process in its entirety.
Still about products. Where is the company getting so many organic ingredients from production? Of extent. Does Zimzino have its own plantations and fishing grounds?
No, we don't, which is really fortunate, because when you look at the world at the moment and the issues there are, the biggest problem anybody working in the food and nutrition space at the moment, and supplement space, is ingredients, because of all that's going on in the world. And so if we were only bound to one place, we would have real problems. But we're quite strong in the market. We've got some really good contacts, and we've got some really good providers that we've got excellent relationships with from all over the world, in fact. And this has enabled us a certain amount of agility in these times. So we've got good contacts, we've got good networks to make sure that we're getting a consistency of the quality and type of ingredients that make our formulation. And it's been a challenging year. We've had to be dynamic, we've had to think on our feet, we've had to use our resources to do due diligence and look at new potential partners and check for things like quality and standards are still in place. And in the back of our mind, we've had to think, there may come a point where we have to look at, can we change key parts of a formulation for something else that's an equivalent but not the same? And thankfully, we've not had to make that decision. And for now, we're in a good position, because we're obviously so far in advance, we know what's coming through and what's going to make it to our formulations. But no, we don't do it in-house. The scale of that is immense. The cost of that is immense, and it would be vulnerable. And actually, these times, and we are going through testing times, but you can learn a lot from these times with regards to how things are changing, and things will continue to change over time. And actually having that agility, that flexibility of having a network of really good providers is a far stronger position than just trying to do it all yourself.
Some partners and customers are taking medication to reduce stomach acid and using lansoprazole. Could the effectiveness of balance oil decrease when using those medicines? Aren't these medications too aggressive, and aren't they neutralizing the effect of balance oil?
To really answer that, you'd have to do a specific trial to measure it. But I do understand those products because they're really common products. And the short answer is no, they won't affect it. You don't want to take them at the same time, for sure. You want to separate the time that you would take them. And I would suggest, given the way those medications work, because typically you have to take them 30 to 60 minutes before you eat any kind of food. So the way I would encourage people to do it is to have a strategy. If you have to take that medicine, remember it's probably more likely controlling silent reflux or just acid reflux. So it's working biochemically actually on a very different component. So what I'd suggest they do is that they take their medicine, they give that 30 to 60 minutes, they then eat their meal that they would in time with that, and then immediately after the meal, take their balance oil. They will be fine. And in fact, taking your balance oil with food is a strong strategy anyway, but that's a good way to do it, and the medication won't be a problem.
Thank you. Are there any chemical tests carried out to check what is the speed of degradation of polyphenols in the balance oil from the moment of bottling in terms of months?
There is. And we've actually got a test that's going on at the moment. So we do. So we have these quality control tests and how long something lasts for. And we're actually going through a process at the moment that we're going to start to make all of this documentation available to people online in the back office so that they can see these things, certificates and what they relate to. We've got a study going on at the moment in Canada where they're testing them. The problem with these kind of studies are, we have the data already, but it's good for you to update your data. And actually with something like balance oil, you can measure it in months and years, never mind weeks and days. But one of the problems with these types of studies is, well, you tell me, what's the problem with that type of study? That's the problem with everything. But if we're going to test the consistency, like the quality of a product over weeks, months, years, what's the problem? It takes weeks, months, years. That's exactly it, because it's measured in real time. So we've got a test that we've got a whole new batches that went off the early part of this year, but we do have our quality and compliance documentation in place, so everything is certified. If it says on the bottle how long it's going to last, you can have every single faith in that. It's measured against the staple.
Thank you. Why isn't the balance oil and Revo bottled in a glass packaging?
Great question. Why would we bottle it in glass packaging?
Sorry?
Why would we?
I mean, the concern that putting oil and storing it in a plastic jar or bottle somehow affects quality of the balance oil.
Yeah, and it's an interesting way to think, isn't it? And I understand it. So first of all, we'll go backwards. So we have it in a plastic bottle. The bottles themselves are assessed, and we look for potential co-contamination from the bottle, even if it's subjected to heat and then subjected to time. And it meets with the highest possible rigorous standards. And again, we've just done that recently. The reason we've done it recently is that we ship now to more humid countries. So we were more interested to look at what the transition, the impact that has, and then when a bottle is being stored in Florida or Malaysia, in these more humid, hotter countries. And nothing. Brilliant. The product we use with they have these certifications around it that ensure that nothing from the bottle gets into the product. Which, I have to say, as a purist now, makes sense, because the plastics that they use are far less porous than glass. Glass is a more porous product. So, glass is great for stopping things from leaking, but not so great when it comes from other influential factors. Glass has also become one of these products that there's a lot of mythology about with regards to recyclables and impact on the environment is nonsense. It's like, I promise you, don't get me started. We've done so much work on this. If glass was the better option, I would 100% want us to have glass. So when you start to look at ecological, environmental impact, think of the weight, the impact that has just on transition. Think of the manufacturing process and what that does, the temperatures that they have to work at to produce it. Think of the sheer numbers. There's a whole heap of mythology around about the kind of the ecological virtues of glass. It just doesn't stack up under it at all, but it's a more porous product. And so it's actually less consistent, it's less stable for us, and it's more vulnerable. We would have far more breakages if we packaged everything in glass. Fact. It's a more porous product. So then managing things for cross-contamination becomes more and more of an issue. It has a greater environmental impact. So it doesn't hit any box that we want to reach. We know the level of rigor that goes around the plastic bottles. The color of the bottle actually protects the product, helps to protect it from sunlight. The bottles are great, really good. What we want to invest in is how we can make them even better with regards to the recyclable notion of it, where those are derived from. That's what we're really focused on, is making that an ever more ethical way. But we're going to stick with plastics. We want it to be a plastic, but we will always work towards a more ethical, effective, and ecological version. But the plastics, with the assurances we have that minimize any potential of contamination, come with far more reassurance than anything else.
Can I add one small question to that? If you ever considered to somehow together back all those plastic bottles, because there are a certain level of, there are percentage of customers who actually would like to recycle back the bottles.
Well, I don't know if you know, we have an amazing person in the product team called Geir from Norway. And he's exactly the kind of person you want in his role. And he does all our compliance and our quality stuff, and he's incredible, incredible. And we had our product team meeting 2 weeks ago. We didn't have one this week because we had the strategy meeting. And Geir was saying that his dream is that, a bit like you have all over Norway and Sweden, you have places where you take the bottle back and you get like a deposit back on the bottle, and they take the bottle and they clean the bottle and it goes off for reuse. And so we've actually started to go, well, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea. So we are starting to think on those lines. How could we have, and we're actually writing currently, I'm part of this committee at Zinzino, we're looking at our sustainability policy and how we can do better by doing right. And so these kind of ideas are gold to us at the moment, because these are nice little things that one bottle at a time is nothing, but we move a lot of bottles. So if we could have quite a big impact on that. So we are thinking on similar lines. The problem is we've got people in Florida, India, but that's okay. Problems are just there to be fixed.
By the way, I have one customer from ancient Rome, and he's asking why we don't have ceramic bottles.
Let me go back. The weight of the things and the vulnerability of the things and how porous the thing. Yeah.
But that's how sometimes we think. Let's ask question.
Yeah.
The balance oil is an excellent product, same as Revo. Have you thought about indicating more information about the added olive oils in the bottle, harvest year, peroxide levels of free fatty acids, polyphenol levels?
No, we haven't, but it's a good idea. That's about my answer.
Right?
No, but it is. It's a good idea. I particularly because we do, believe it or not, there's a ton of information in the back, and what we're always interested by is it's almost, the more we provide, we sometimes feel like there's someone who goes, okay, now they've done all that, what else can we ask for? What else is it that we can ask for? And it's ask them what colour shoes the person was wearing when they lifted the bottle from there and put it in there. Right, we got that information. What colour shoes did George have on? Right, let's go. So from that point of view, people want more and more and more, and that's okay. And we are actually working on kind of trying to get to the complete transparency and go, everything you'd ever want to know, God forbid, is there. It's there, just go and have a look. But what I did like about that question, that I think is it's more provocative, and I like it, which was this notion of the time of year, the harvest year. I like that. I like that a lot. That's a really good idea. So I'm going to take that one back with me. I love that. It's a very nice idea.
Thank you. I have heard about studies that military personnel have a very low omega-3 index. Is it related work-life conditions of increased stress affect the viability of omega-3 molecules, or is it affected by the fact of reduced availability of good quality food?
It's both. So I've done a lot of work with military in the UK in particular. So their dietary practice just doesn't have enough omega-3 in it. It really doesn't. So that's one part. But yeah, for sure, the amount of stress, physical stress, psychological stress, has an impact on your omega-6-3 status and ratio. And the more training, physical training that you are doing, the more you're breaking down those systems, the more pro-inflammatory markers that are up. If you're not controlling for that, that in itself becomes systemic. Military personnel are typically training on a daily basis. Sometimes it's intense to really, really intense. Added to that, they can be under really demanding psychological testing conditions as well. That is the ripe environment to disadvantage your omega-6-3 ratio. And really, to be effective, you would have to really regulate that individualized soldier by soldier and make sure they were getting a sufficient amount in their diet. And whilst military food all around the world has improved over the past 3-4 decades, you know, lots of really good cooked food, they don't consider things like this. They don't consider things like this. And more often than not, we have a phrase in the UK, I think it gets used around the world, that an army marches on its stomach, and soldiers want a good, wholesome food. They've typically got plenty of carbs, plenty of proteins, bit of fat, boom, and they're gone. And actually the quality of that, particularly when it comes to the fatty fish and ensuring there's enough omega-3 of the right type, just doesn't feature. So it's a double-ended problem. Yeah.
Thank you. What characteristics are typical for athletes before they start taking the Xeno Health Protocol?
The ratio, the 6-3 ratio, what's typical for athletes. It's actually, well, this is interesting. What do you think?
You previously just told that it's slightly better.
As a level, what do you think we see on average as a ratio? 8, yeah, we see worse. And that's because they're training every day. So those inflammatory markers are higher. So I'd say that, I couldn't say this is an exact figure, but based off the data I've seen so far, I'd say they're more in the category of around about 17 to 18 to 1 as an average than 14.8. So a little bit higher, but they exercise more. But also I will say they take longer to adjust for the same reason. Because they're training so consistently, they need more amounts, they use more of it as fuel. So the 120 days doesn't typically apply. Most athletes we're seeing now to get into balance is like 160, 170 days.
Thank you. The question about young athletes, 11, 15 years. What dosages of the Xeno products and which Xeno products do you recommend?
I mean, for that age, because they're still developing, they're still maturing, so the balance oil for sure, that's a given. We can do a whole talk just about the sport and impact of making sure your omega-3s are right. So that for sure. And this is an interesting one. We know the state of childhood diets, and they're more likely to have confectionaries on a daily basis, more convenience foods. They typically drink more carbonated drinks than adults do. And then you say, well, maybe they should take a dietary fiber, xenobiotic, and people go, oh, that might be a bit too much. Not at all. This is a really developing, this is the time to nurture the gut microbiota and therefore enable them to make better absorption of things like protein in the diet that's going to increase their protein kinetics and get them stronger, build more lean mass. So I think for a child, for sure, I would go for the balance oil and for the xenobiotic. I would be looking at the total nutrients with something like Extend, but because of what they're doing and given the amount of vitamins and minerals we put in Lean Shake, for a child, because they want to hit up the protein needs, maybe the child's protocol should be balance oil, xenobiotic, and Lean Shake. Maybe that's where I position it.
Thank you. What are your recommendations for body regeneration? Sleep, food, others?
Oh, for body regeneration, well, sleep's the biggie. And as some of you may know, if you've been really bored and struggling to sleep, and you went and found some of my published research, 2 years ago we wrote a consensus statement through the British Medical Sports Journal, British Journal of Sports Medicine, which was Sleep in the Athlete. And people like myself, a panel of people who they thought were like the leading authorities on the area, we wrote a consensus statement. Sleep is the #1 recovery strategy in the world. Whether you're an athlete, if you overcome an illness, disease, day-to-day life, sleep is the #1. Sleep is an essential component of being human. That's when you go to sleep, the mind commits things to memory. It's when the body rejuvenates itself, does most of its healing, replenishes most of the muscle mass, takes care of things that are happening in the gut. You get a neurological offload. Sleep is essential. Hydration. 2/3 of your body is water. Who'd have thought it? Simple water that I know is non-exciting. One of the things that drives me mad, I'll speak to adults and I'll say, drink more water, and they go, it's not very exciting though, is it? And he goes, not meant to entertain you. It's not there to dance and distract you. It just keeps you alive. It's really essential. So you should, and a really good habit is when you wake up in the morning, go straight to the tap, draw off about 300 milliliter, a cup full of water, and just drink it. Because I promise you, the one thing that will have happened is you'll have dehydrated a little bit overnight. Because you've been asleep for 6, 7, 8 hours. You haven't took any water on board. So wake the system up. Give the kidneys a good flush out and get the whole system reinvigorated through water. And aim to drink around about, this kind of glass size is good. Try and drink about 8 of them a day. Not in one go. That's the other thing people say, that's a lot, isn't it? I'm not asking you to get 2 big bottles and start a timer and go, right, and go for it. Drink it out over the day. And then people say, well, I increased how much I was drinking and I started to go to the toilet more. That will even off. As you get into a better hydrated status, that will even off and you won't be going to the toilet all the time. And then nutrition. You are what you eat. This kind of takes us right back to the start. Sleep, that's the key. Hydration, 2/3 of your body. And then we go into nutrition. You are what you eat. And if you exercise really well, but eat really badly, you will look and feel how you eat, not how you exercise. Promise you. If you exercise for 30 minutes a day, that's 2% of your day. If that's the only investment you make in your health, don't expect to get much back. What you eat, how you drink, and how you sleep contributes up to around about another 72% of your day. So that's what you are. All that stuff is what you are. That's the most of who you are. So think about what you eat. Try and make a better choice. It's not about perfection, it's about improvement. If you love chocolate biscuits, okay, just have half. If you normally eat 3, have 2. If you normally eat 2, have 1. If you normally have a takeaway meal once a week, try and have it once every 2 weeks. Just try and make better choices. And when it's about the reduction part, that's the challenge. So recognize it as a challenge. But the addition part can be fun. Because some foods that are really good for you taste amazing. That's why I start people with blueberries. It's an easy win. They're really sweet, they're small, you can add them to things. People go, that's okay. Raspberries the same, really good. Packed with antioxidants, loads of vitamins in there, dietary hydration. You're onto a winner. Watercress, barely notice you're eating it. Eat some walnuts. Just build up. Just add things in. Start to just have a little win every time. And if you're getting your sleep right, if you are hydrating well, and more of what you eat is helping your health status, you're going to transform yourself. Within 6 months, within a year, 2 years, I promise you, you'll be an entirely different person. It's not about managing symptoms and suppressing things. It's about enhancing systems and expressing things and enjoying life and the world.
Regarding sleep, one more question. Is it important before sleep, some hour or 2 hours, not having screen time?
Turn off. Stop doom scrolling. Getting into bed and having one last look at everything that's wrong in the world. Yeah, really? You had that for dinner? That's interesting. Just turn off. Distraction is the definition of modernity. It's like that's the age we live in. Just distracted all the time. And it can be fun. We all have our go-to social media thing and that we do. But really, you and how you are is far more important. And all the sleep studies we've done, having a sleep regime, a sleep routine is the way to do it. If you can control the temperature of your room around about 16 degrees is optimal. 16 degrees, optimal. Have a dark room. Dark. Because light is what we call the most powerful Zeitgeber, time cue. We are plugged into this planet. And the transition of light sends a message through the retinal tract. It's picked up at the back here by what we call the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nuclei, which is one of the central governors, which is that the posterior aspect of the hypothalamus. This is correlated to changes in your core body temp. So when it's dark and you're in a room that's around about 16 degrees, your core temp just goes down just nicely. The melatonin sets in. You drift off to the land of Nod. But most people get in their own way. So they have a room that's too warm, they put the light on, they have distractions in there, then they get in bed and they go, I'll have one last look. And they got this light and heat right next to the retinal tract for 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then they put it down and go, can't get sleep. Because you've just been saying to your brain, it's daytime, it's daytime. So turn it off, turn it off. And God forbid, don't watch the news before you go to bed. Just don't even dream about it. An hour before you go to bed, watch happy things, nice things, have a conversation. Ignore it all.
Thank you. And regarding screen time for kids, what would be?
You want me to answer that? All I'm going to say to you is I've got 3. Best of luck is what I'm going to say to you. Best of luck. The less is better. We all know that. Our children now, I've got 3 children. I live in the real world. Our children are subject to so many influences, uncontrolled influence. There is no peer check on what happens on social media. They get subject to all kinds of information, misinformation, peer pressure like you wouldn't believe. I feel so grateful that I grew up in the 70s and 80s when all you knew was what was happening within a street. So you had nothing to live up to or care about. No one cared what you wore or anything like that. We didn't know brand names. I had no idea. It was blissful. Our children are under so much pressure now. And to me, not from a scientific point of view, but from a parent point of view, from a societal point of view, it just makes sense that the less of that, the better. Get them muddy, get them outdoors, get them out of breath, get them falling off stuff. That's what's meant to happen. Get them engaging and playing and building up real ties. And the less of this, the influence of it. But some of it, because that's the world we live in, for sure. But less is more. That's my opinion.
Thank you. It says that athletes have some periods of slow immunity. Can you tell more detail about it, please?
Wow, that's huge. That's a lecture. They don't have slow immunity, they have suppressed immunity. So when you're training a lot, the immune system is under a lot of load and is having to cope with that. And there are critical times when an athlete is reaching a peak for like the Olympics, world, like big event, when all the kind of concerns around health and wellness reach a peak as well, because it's a balancing line. They're physically primed to do the best that they can do, but you're running that gauntlet and risk because you can't stay there for long. The system is under so much stress. And then there are times when they are overreaching. So they're doing lots and lots of exercise and training, but of the wrong type, too much. And you get the balance wrong. And what that happens is not slow immunity, it's immune suppression. So the immune system isn't functioning as well. So they're more susceptible to get coughs, colds, pick up infections. We're way better at that now. Way better at that now. The way athletes are managed, there's far more understanding of that, so it happens less frequently. In fact, the worst for it are the recreationally active. So the amateur athletes who are taking on stuff because they're passionate. They might be a banker of a daytime, but they're training 20 hours a week and they're running big events at the weekend. they're the ones most at risk because there's no support around them. There's no one managing them and measuring them and monitoring them and making sure this doesn't happen. And they're the ones then that the people in the community go, that exercise is no good for you. There was a guy at the end of the road, he's always really fit, running marathons, and then he had a heart attack. That's where these stories come from. And it's because there's no support around them. No one's managing that. They're more at risk. Elite athletes now, it's very rare that there's a problem because we know what happens. So we measure it, we monitor it, we keep an eye on it, and we make sure that they stay safe and healthy.
Thank you. How to reduce the risk of injuries for children in daily life activities and in sports?
You can't. Yeah, you can't. And why would you? It's part of the problem, isn't it? It's part of the problem. Like, we've wrapped our children up in bubble wrap and, don't do anything. I fell out of so many trees, off slides, the back of swings, and you toughen up, don't you? I played rugby, smashed every single bit. We've gone soft because parents sit there and the minute the child wobbles, get it. Like, I promise you, if that child falls and gets back up, it's going to learn, when I did that I fell. But every time we don't, and we alter the stimulus, there's no learning. There's no learning. And we're just setting people up for disaster further down the road. But the way that you do it with some intelligence, if I'm interpreting the question right, is get your kids active. Active kids don't have a problem when they fall over because they're strong and they're robust and there's been tendon and ligament and muscular development. So when they fall over, they just get up and go like that and carry on. The problem we've got now are children who are sedentary, who've got terrible diets, who don't move, who are on this all the time or on this, and they fall over, and there's no development. Too many parents writing letters going, you can't do sports today. Never write that letter. Never write that letter. Write a letter saying he doesn't want to do sports, so make sure he does double, but don't let him see this letter. That's what you should do. It's the best thing you could do for your child. And I've got children, and they're normal children. They don't care what I do at all. I'll tell you a funny story about that in a moment. They don't care at all. They're normal. And my middle child, daughter, she'll do I forgot my PE kit. I go, it doesn't matter. I always keep spares in the boot of my car. I learned this lesson a long time ago. So just as I'm dropping them off, and they go, I forgot my PE kit. No problem. Give me 2 seconds. In the boot, there you go. There's your PE kit. Off you go. Not a problem. Because they're just kids, and sometimes they don't feel like it, but we know better. Robust, active children aren't having problems. They're not. And if you're going to participate in life, and for sure if you're going to give sport a good go, you're going to get the odd knock. But they're just the trophies. That's just the medals of honor for living life and taking part. Why would you want to be this perfectly preserved but incapable of movement human? That's great. I've never broken everything. I'm on 7 different types of medication, and my diet's awful, and I can't sleep, but I've never broken anything. Like, well done. Fantastic. We need to be more robust. So, on that note, not only should we encourage them into sport, but let's get them strong. Strength is essential for all of us. The biggest indicator of your quality of life as you age is your physical independence. Did you know that? Every study has been done. The biggest determinant of how you will perceive the quality of your life as you get older is how physically independent you are. And physical independence is how strong you are. Let's get real, that's what it is. Can you get up, move about, do the things that you want to do for yourself? So we should all be doing exercise every single day to be strong and to be robust and to be fit and to be agile as best as we can. And that starts at childhood, when they're laying down the blueprint for the adults they're going to be becoming. So they should be doing strength work and reactive work and jumping off things and sport. Get them robust, and the more they do, the better.
Thank you. Is it possible to help restore iron deficiency in the body, lowered hemoglobin ferritin, with the help of the Xeno products?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's sufficient amount in Extend. Definitely Extend versus Extend Plus. We've actually considered bringing a mono product. Not sure if we will just yet because there's plenty out there and we do make an iron offer within those products, but it is there to be helped. And actually, it's not just about the iron as well, it's about absorption and upregulation. And something like Xenobiotic, which is taking better care of the gut and enable better absorption, and even the balance oil, which will bring about a reduction of circulating triglycerides. All these things are what you call kind of pathway enablers, and that enables the body to absorb more iron as well. So for sure.
Thank you. After taking Xenogene course, 4 courses each 3 months, the menopause symptoms came back even tough. They had already gone before, especially very strong hot flashes. After a while, they disappeared again. What can be the reason for these symptoms appearing after taking Xenogene?
I genuinely think that's just coincidence. There's no, I've in the UK with regards to female athletes, I was actually the head of performance for the women's football team, England football team, for a number of years. A lot of the athletes I've supported on pathway through the Olympics have been females. And because of that, you have to do work around menstrual cycle, and then you look at perimenopausal and menopausal implications. And in fact, 2 years ago, UK Active and Europe Active brought me in as a part of their strategy team to write some education around perimenopausal and menopausal changes, adaptations, what you can do with exercise and diet to help that. And actually, none of the core active components in Xenogene will make a difference on that. So that's probably just one of those, correlation is not always cause and effect. It's coincidental. It's unfortunate, but I don't believe it's actually attributed to the product.
Thank you. The question is about vitamin D scale on the Xeno test webpage. In many sources, vitamin D level 30 till 100 ng to milliliter is considered as a normal and recommended. But on the Xeno test webpage, from 20 to 50 is considered as normal or green zone. From 50 to 80 is considered as a yellow and orange zone. But above 80 is considered as a red zone or overdosage. Why is so?
No, we encourage everyone to get to around about 100.
Actually, I think I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
I think it's over 100 because mine was, yes.
Yeah, we encourage 100.
Yes, it's my question. Actually, in many countries, the normal position till 100, and it should be. And when our customers see, I don't know, 70, 80, 85, it's already red. And they ask, I don't need so much D. And I'm explaining, no, you need even 100. And many modern books show that 100 at least should be.
I'll check that I'll check that from a kind of computer
yes,
point.
please, because they stop using.
But even if you have a look, so we did a study, and our recruitment was for people who were low was less than 50. That was our recruitment criteria for the study. So we're definitely, that was our low group.
I remember like at least more than half a year.
Don't mix nanomole and nanogram.
Yeah.
I'm telling about nanogram.
Yeah.
Yes, not nanomole. It's different.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So nanomole. So there's 2 parts to this. So our nanomole, which is 50 to 125, I think we've got as a green zone on that. That's consistent with most of the recommendations around the world. You got to bear in mind we're global. We have to work with regulations and authorities. We can't publish information that contradicts that. And sometimes territory by territory, that can be really difficult, even with balance oil. So we have to be careful around that with regard to what we publish and what we get behind. And so in that range, that is a verified range that we can get behind. And even that, if you have a look at our upper limit, we play a bit of a game there because we don't give the cautions that other regulatory bodies do, because we actually believe that higher doses have got a certain amount of safety to them as well. So we recommend some level of consideration at that point, but we don't bring in a cutoff. But in our nanomole, we go from 50 to 125, which I can't remember the conversion in my head, but that is the verified range that we can publish.
So can you check with nanogram? It should be till 100 green zone, actually.
Like I said, though, we're comparing two different standards. I can't remember the conversion off the top of my head, but that 50 to 125 nanomole is the one that's consistent with the regulations, and that's what we're obliged to publish. And the data we've collected is for people who are low or less than 50, and we're looking at the dosage requirements to get them into the verifiable range. So the conversion, I can't remember off the top of my head between the two, but we know that the 50 to 125 nanomole is the one that, from a regulations and authorities point of view, is what we can publish and get behind.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Because I have microphone. My question about children recommended balance from Zinzina.
Yeah.
I'm really confused because I see my children and many other children why they should have 5:1. Why the normal for them just half of 12%? In my opinion, they need even more. So I always, when I comment children test, I always open adult form because I don't want to see parents that 6% of omega-3, it's a green zone. I see they still have problems with this level. They need more.
But we can't go, I mean, with all due respect, we can't go off testimony against evidence. The research evidence that says with the biochemical and physiological levels that are required, which all that research went into to publish those guidelines, says different. And the children are adapting and fluctuating at such an alarming rate compared to an adult. So once we reach past 21 and we've hit maturation, and then we're in a more stable kind of homeostatic range, then the values hold up. But beneath that, they don't. There's such an amount of variance with regards to those growth factors that are in there. So I'd have to disagree against that. The evidence, there's nowhere near as much evidence as there is with regards to the mature populations, but the evidence that's there is really good, strong, compelling evidence, says those ranges are exactly where they should be. And children will fluctuate far more frequently. If you really wanted to go to town on your child and monitor it, then you'd go for key maturation phases, and you would measure them far more frequently, and you would adjust. But those guidelines actually stack up under scrutiny. And I really couldn't bow to testimony on individual cases on that, because these are taken from sample sizes of hundreds of thousands and based on a really firm biochemical understanding of the undulations that take place within those key maturing years. And so it's one of those that we're trying to produce, and we're giving guidelines to the world, to hundreds of thousands of users. And they have to be guidelines that are rigorous and in place enough for people to work off and against. And we can't let low number, like anecdotal testimony, come in and say, well, that's not the case. We collect a lot of data to see how those values compare and stack up. And in fact, one of the first things that MRE did was go through the database, separate out the ones that we knew were verifiably child samples, and compare that to the evidence that was out there to see how consistent it was. So we actually verified the state of evidence that was available through the research against our own observations of the database. And both of those don't paint that picture. They really don't. And it's such a dynamic and fluctuating period of growth and change that I really, unless you could work with a child on a one-to-one, and really, if you're really going to do it, you'd have to probably be measuring at least every 90 to 100 days to pick up the variation. And then the argument would be, is there a value to such fine-tuning to the variation? Or do you work off the ratio? And certainly when you get a child up to the age around about 16, 18, key milestone indicators for full maturation, and then start to adopt more of an adult range. But we have to be. We're a test-based, evidence-based company, and that's what the evidence says, compellingly so. So I'd have to stand behind that statement on that.
Thank you so much. Just by my experience, when children have problem, it disappeared when we go to 2-to-1 and 10-12% of omega-3. Before that, it's still there.
Again, there's just so much to delve into. It's individual case, like what's the problem, what's the thing that we're talking about, what other kind of mechanisms have shifted and adjusted around it, what's the nature of the child. We're talking about population, you're talking about individual. The two, they're worlds apart. It's like when people say to me, should people take this for that? And I go, I don't know, because I'd have to speak to that person and look at what medication they're on, what their treatment pathway has been, what it is they do, how their diet structured, boom, 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 boom. I'd never be able to say this does that in those cases. And again, we're going off a population sample size versus individual cases, and actually what it is that's changing under those terms. So we've always got to do this. We've got to take the responsibility of facing a population with the guidelines that we put in place. It's individualized in as much that you can take an objective measure and then you can look at what it is you want to adjust around what you do. That's where the individualized component comes into it. But we are facing populations, and growing populations. More and more people are taking the test and signing up to go on board with the product day by day. And so we have to look at things from a population-wide point of view. And the work that you do with the people you're at, and for instance yourself, if you're in a position where you feel like you can modify that to the individual because you've got all that information, then that's 100% what you should do. Because you're managing that person. You're close to the situation. You can reassess it. You can track it. You know what it is that you're working with. But we can't adjust guidelines every time an individual case shows something different, because the tens of thousands of cases are typically captured. You know the bell-shaped, we haven't got a paper, have we? But you all know the bell-shaped curve, where you look at normality and you look at your outliers. And we have to look at that capture 95th percentile, 2.5% either side. We have to look at that normality curve. And we have to present information and guidelines for those people within that range. There will always be outliers. There's always outliers. And that's the roles that you face when you work individually and yourself. And if you're looking at that data and that interpretation and you go, well, no, for this child, for this individual, we need to tweak it this way, then that's what you're empowered to do, and that's exactly what you should do, because you're the person working closely to them. But we've got to give guidelines that face the whole population. We have to.
Thank you. Please start to prepare your questions, because this is last question, and after that we can start to ask questions from audience. Even taking very little dosage of the xenobiotic, a person has different strong reactions in the bowel, flatulence, diarrhea, or constipation. What are your recommendations? Should the person stop taking xenobiotic?
No. All those signs are actually healthy signs. But it does take time to build up. It really does take time to build up. And I encourage people to go from half a scoop for a week, let things adjust, maybe 10 days, then go to a full scoop, another 10 days, then a scoop and a half. Like, you build up over time, because you will encounter changes within the gut as it starts to respond, and as you start to feed those bacteria, and as you start to get alterations to your stool formation, and these things start to happen. And it's one of those things. Someone talked about this recently in the terms of cosmetics, and it was something to do with a face mask, and they said that when you get the redness, that's like the activation, so it shows it's working. With xenobiotic, when you start to get changes in gut behavior and those kind of things, it's actually an indicator of the product starting to bring about a change in effect. And people get put off because flatulence isn't pleasant, particularly for the people you're living with. But it's an adjustment phase, and things will settle. Things will settle, and it's about seeing that through. But actually, just this past week, dealing with somebody, speaking with somebody on a one-to-one, the recommendation I gave them, because they've got a background condition to it, was start even less, not even half a scoop. Just start to gradually introduce very, very low level and build up a tolerance to it as low as you possibly can, and then just gradually increase. Because every time, the minute you start taking it, you're making a positive difference. And every time you start to increase it, you're taking a step towards improvement. And take your time. Because if today you're not taking any, that tiny bit tomorrow is already an improvement. When that tiny bit becomes this kind of tiny bit, there's 100% improvement. So you're on that pathway to improvement, but these signs, they're actually just signs that I know it can be uncomfortable, but they're actually just signs that it's working. It really is. So yeah, don't be deterred. Now this is starting to kill my ears. So is there another way I can work with a mic or release this off a little bit? In fact, it looks ridiculous, but if that stays there, I'm all right. Go to that. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Have you turned that one off? Right. We'll leave that there. And he just gets to the point where he's just like digging in. And as you can see, I was gifted with plenty good ears. When I was in school as a child, my friends used to call me radar. Things like that. They go, Colin can hear it. Right then, before my voice packs in, let's answer some more questions.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. It was a very great lecture. I have a question about the balance oil, and can the usage of it provoke the rise of cholesterol?
Will it provoke a rise in cholesterol?
Yes.
No. In fact, all the studies to date have shown how it positively balances out HDL versus LDL and reduces circulating triglycerides. So no, it has the exact opposite effect. In fact, have there been an individual case that you've seen? What was that?
Yeah, that's individual case.
Yeah.
That's one of the.
I'm using all those products for 8 years, and my cholesterol increased. Never had, but for the last 4 years it's increased, especially this low.
The LDL.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thing is with these, it's like anything else. You've got to look at, well, what other kind of things have changed around that time. And for record, and you'll know this, you're a nutritionist, whenever you ask anyone what else has changed, they go, nothing. Nothing else has changed. And that's never the case. And that's the thing to do, is to have a look at what else has changed. Has your physical activity levels changed? Have they gone up or down? Have there been any other kind of changes to your diet? The other thing as well is to look at your family history. And actually, there is some evidence, I'm not actually that convinced by it, but there is some evidence that changes to cholesterol levels for certain people has an age component to it. So as we age, that there is a level of chronological impact on cholesterol levels. I'm not that convinced, but there is evidence emerging in that area. But that's the thing to look at, is those wider changes.
But it couldn't be that it was very difficult for me to adapt balance oil and increase this omega-3 always, and I'm just using more than this dosage, and then only I could increase till 8%. I never had higher. 5 years I just had 6.5.
Right,
This
yeah.
This it was low for myself.
And that was at what level were you taking at that?
Sorry.
So what dosage were you taking?
Now.
No, then when you were beneath.
I started with normal, but then
Yeah.
by recommendation of Paul Clayton, I
Yeah.
used 2 and 3.
Yeah.
This, and I
3?
Dosages per day, and then I increased my omega-3 level. But I said these colors.
And so how much do you take now?
Now it's 2.
2. And when was the last time you did a test?
In January.
And what was the score?
It was 2.8.
And what was your level?
7.6.
7.6. And your ratio was down, and you're taking 2. And that was in the January. It's interesting.
I already made a lot of tests. I sent to Paul Clayton and then to Linda. Yeah, but it's.
Because it could be, I mean, this is the thing, there could be some underlying kind of, hereditary factor with regards to your cholesterol. That can play a part in it. Not everybody, and this is why the dosage has to be adjusted. Not everybody responds to the same type of dosage at the same time, and changes in life mean we should change the dosage, and even changes in age should mean that we should change the dosage. But the good thing that you've got is that you're just knocking on the threshold of the total level, but you've got a really good, you're less than 3. But there's still scope to go on your less than 3. So my original thoughts would be, because the cholesterol part of it itself, and the American Association of Cardiologists published a paper on this in 2017 where they said people need to stop talking about cholesterol. Cholesterol is not the problem, it's the inflammation. Your body's been dealing with cholesterol for millions of years. It's the inflammation that's the problem. It's the inflammation that creates a space that the cholesterol just can't pass through, and that's what builds up that creates the plaque and creates the blockage. And I actually agree with a lot of that. I think that cholesterol is a bit of a red herring, what we call it. It can be a little bit of a distracting factor. It's a part of the mechanism. I'm not convinced it's the causality of it. But for me, there's still a bit of scope with regards to how you could get your level a bit higher and get your ratio a little bit lower. But probably the approach I'd encourage would be to have a more undulating pattern of how much of you consume of it. So I would encourage you to go in blocks. So it'd be that you might look at like 4 months throughout the winter months, certainly from a December, January, February, March, I might take a little bit more. And then in the spring to summer months, I'd reduce that level back down, and I'd have an undulating pattern of it. I think if you did that, you'd probably get above 8%, and you'd probably get your overall inflammatory down a little bit. It'd be interesting to see what happens with your cholesterol. And everyone, I don't know if you're aware of this, but actually the ratio of your cholesterol is more important than the total amount. And I'd be more interested to see the change in ratio, or whether or not they stay. But your circulating triglycerides, typically, study after study, sample after sample, come down and actually stay down the longer you're on product. So for me, I'd look at a little bit of seasonal variation of when you increase and reduce back down a little bit, and see what impact that has. Because like most things, there's a certain level of like what we call primed sensitivity, and particularly within a cell, and we can overwhelm structures. So for example, in the morning, particularly you males, but it's also true for females, you have more testosterone available. So that's the time when you have most testosterone, but it overwhelms the sarcomere. So there's more available, but it saturates the sarcomere in the muscle. So that's not when you're strongest. Later on in the day, testosterone backs off, but there's still testosterone available, and the sarcomere becomes more sensitive to it, so it makes more use of it. You're actually strongest around about 1800, 6 p.m. is when you're strongest, and that's actually not the peak time for testosterone. And within the cell itself, there are similar sensitivities that we see. And these can be seasonal because we're all circadian animals. And actually, a more logarithmic, a more undulating pattern can peak sensitivity. And when you peak sensitivity, you can get a better response. For athletes and people who are training, that undulation happens because we alter it to when they're training. I do wonder if we need to look at more general population guideline changes so that people aren't just taking the same amount all the time, because that doesn't stack up with what we understand from biochemistry. Little bits of changing can peak the sensitivity to it. So that's why I'd encourage you to try. But I would also have a look at how much of a hereditary component there is with regards to your cholesterol levels, and then check your ratios. The ratio is more important than the level.
I have one more question. I have a client, and she's quite a young age and having very hard osteoporosis. She's 14, and after the screening, she got response that all the situation is like for 75 years old lady. So what you would suggest, except balance oil, of course?
I mean, this is why it's so hard. I feel bad. This happens all the time. Like commenting on individual cases. Like there's so little information to go off. And yet there's so much you need to know before you can start to say, well, what you can effectively really do. I mean, you need to look at a lifestyle analysis, you need to look at a physical activity exercise analysis, you need to do a dietary breakdown. There's so many things that you have to go into. I'd even be considering at that level not just a food orientation, which is the type of foods that person will typically consume and feature regularly in the diet, but even potentially a food sensitivity kind of scheme. And I'm not a bigger fan of the elimination approach, but it can be useful if it's really closely monitored over short periods of time to see what kind of foods trigger a more positive response versus an aggressive response. See if there is any, not intolerance, but like little bits of low-level insensitivity. So there's so much work to do in that if you're going to look at it on an individual basis. But to me, and again, this brings me back around to health protocol, if you're going to cut through the middle and you're going to think, well, what I need to be a feature of this are core elements of macro and micronutrients. So your macros are your protein, carbs, and your fats. Within your fats comes your essential fats. So you want to make sure that that's right, but you're already working on that. Then I'd have a look at your other macros. So what kind of proteins and what kind of carbohydrates and how much, what are total amounts? So are they getting approximately 1.5 grams of proteins per kilogram their body mass per day? Because a lot of people don't. A lot of people make a lot of assumptions around protein intake, and most people make an assumption and they're actually way beneath it on a daily basis. And study after study after study shows for effective protein synthesis, you need to be hitting that sufficient amount on a daily basis. And take a diverse approach to protein. You know, there's more than one type of protein. It doesn't all have to be derived from meat. In fact, I'd encourage you to look at non-meat sources of protein. Carbohydrates play a huge part. You know, are they getting enough? Are they getting enough of the right type? Are they getting too much of the wrong type? And then you go into your micronutrient profiling. Are they getting sufficient amounts of K2, vitamin D, vitamin C, all that list? And that's where you go back to product, because rather than trying to achieve that through a diet, although you should be looking at a whole food approach wherever possible, it's making sure there's a sufficient amount. To me, and it sounds like too easy a thing to say, but if you start from the health protocol, if you go, right, let's get the essential fats right, let's prime the gut to better absorb, and let's just make sure we're starting maybe not 4 a day, 1 a day, 2 a day, then we know we've got those bases covered. And now what can we start to manage and change around diet orientation? It takes time. You've got to work with the client. It takes time.
May I? Yeah. There's a more general question then. There are quite many medical doctors in Latvia who say that after using balance oil, their patients get problems with liver.
With liver?
Liver, yeah. What
problems do they get?
Yeah. Bad analysis.
Yeah.
Sometimes his alert is increasing. Alert.
Yeah.
I would say yes, quite many people who start to use balance oil, if they are making like standard analysis, standard tests, they see that levels of allet acid is increased. And then like typical attitude is, oh, those measures are getting worse, but especially, it's like liver is working more, basically. But doctors in Latvia consider that as this is a liver problem. This is not good for liver.
I understand that from both sides, to be honest with you. I understand that from both sides. And this happens a lot when you start to... You see, to me, when you start to look at signs of increased activation and function, and you start to compare that against normative values, and what you would see is a change in a normative population and why that would happen. And then the doctor will go, well, the liver is having to work harder. It's having to work harder, and that's a bad thing. So, it's taken that from what we call epidemiological data, because that's how most people are. So when I have those kind of debates, not necessarily always about the liver, but about other components with medical colleagues of mine, I say, don't you think we need to stop taking the normative data from a population that we know is generally sick? Because what you're doing is you're taking a profile of someone who's got a poor diet, largely sedentary behavior, generally inactive, and more and more of the population are either dealing with a first comorbidity or So maybe that's not the data we should be drawing from. And maybe we should be going back to brass tacks, biochemistry and physiology, and looking at, well, if we're seeing these changes, and we're seeing hormonal changes, we're seeing different expressions of acid profile in somebody who's presenting and actually with a lot of clear health markers, maybe this doesn't mean the same in that context. Maybe that's what we need to start to interpret differently. And so you'd have to look at absolute values, you'd have to look at other things that are going on with them. But to me, if other health indices are positive, and particularly if somebody's in a far better ratio, total amount, if you were to take an inflammatory marker test and that was in a good range, and you saw this increased function, I'd actually interpret that as enabled function and a required upregulation, given the new biochemistry of the status, rather than a negative in itself. Because sometimes things will upregulate because they're compensating for something that's not in place. If those other components are in place and are actually in a good place, and we see an upregulation, then the mechanism behind that, the expression of change, has arguably been activated by a different central cause. But it's too easy to categorize things as good and bad. And that might seem like a scrambling for an answer, but it happens more than you think. It happens way more than you think. So we're active populations who visit the doctor, and they'll do standardized tests. And they will explain to the doctor, I've seen this happen with HbA1c testing. I've seen somebody who 2 weeks before had come third in an Ironman World Championships competition and had to go for a HbA1c test, and said to the doctor, 2 weeks ago, I did an Ironman in less than 8.5 hours. Will that have any effect on this test? Ironman is where you swim 3.8 kilometers, you cycle 180 kilometers, and then you run a marathon, all in one go, back to back. It's a big competition. And the doctor, because they don't know, said, nope, no problem, that's fine. Did the test, then calls them in and says, yeah, you need to come in, you've got type 2 diabetes. And the athlete goes, have I? Really? Okay. There's no way the fact that I did all this and, we're having those things and training, that had an impact on the test. No, didn't have a test. And they bring them in and they go, because you've tested positive for type 2 diabetes, we're going to retest it whilst we've got you here today, and we're going to look at this medication, that medication. And guess what? The retest comes in and they go, oh, actually it's really, really low. There's no chance you've got type 2 diabetes. And they go, so you're still telling me that Ironman race had no impact on, oh, maybe it did. Ah, yeah, maybe it did. Because things regulate and function differently in different ways under different conditions. And I think that across the board, we've got this skewed perspective on healthy parameters and activation because we look individual at markers and we don't look at the context. Now, I'm saying all this without seeing the individual result and that context for that individual. But my concern would be, because the bigger question is if you have a really healthy diet and you eat the right amount of omega-3 so that you're in level and you're in ratio, can that have a negative health consequence? No. That's where we're trying to get everyone in the world to be, is in a better index, better level, better ratio. That's centrally driven through the World Health Organization and every agenda across the board. We know that it reduces the risk of cardiovascular disease, cardiovascular event, certain types of non-communicable diseases, boom, boom, boom. We know that. So if what we're saying is you can be so healthy that you can be unhealthy, that's an inconsistent narrative. But we're also dealing about individuals. And I've not heard this reported from other parts of the world. So again, it makes me think of the health or the data centricities of what your doctors are looking at.
Can I? Yeah. It's more a question for the record because I know an answer, at least I think so. Partners and customers are plenty times asking about allergies, especially allergy to fish, because people have allergies to fish and they are afraid of consuming balance oil because of the fish oil inside. What would be your comments regarding this point?
Have the vegan one. We have a vegan balance oil.
Yes, but for a standard one.
For me personally, I'm believe it or not, I'm uber cautious, particularly around things that are potentially fatal. like a peanut allergy and a fish allergy. So for me, and you might get a different response from Dr. Emily Gislovec and from Paul. For me, I would say go to the vegan product. Don't. That would be my lock stock take on it. The counter argument would be that the refined fish oil in itself, and given the nature of how it's presented, is unlikely to prompt an allergic reaction to the fish. And I understand that side of the argument, but to me, I wouldn't even get involved. I just go, then just don't take it. Take the vegan one. That's what I'd say. But the reality is that the argument on the other side, because of the refined process and because of the bound within the polyphenol, that an allergic response is so unlikely, most people wouldn't have to really consider it. But I'm the kind of person, I keep my seatbelt on the whole flight. That's who I am. That's the kind of person I am. I'm the kind of person who looks at the end cap rating of a car before I buy one. That's who I am. So, for me, if I had a fish intolerance, a fish allergy, I'd take the vegan product. But I'm going to let you into a little bit of a secret. I don't have a fish allergy or a fish intolerance, but I still take the vegan product. And the reason why I do that is because I believe that, one, it's the future of our industry. It's far more ecologically sustainable for the long term. And also, that's where the omega comes from. Then the fish consumes the algae, and then we take it from the fish. So I like to miss out that step in the process, and I just go straight to the vegan one anyway. But that's just my personal preference. I love eating fish. I'm not anti-eating fish.
Hello. Thank you for the lecture. And I have a question about Xenogene. Is Xenogene safe and recommended for people who have liver or kidney problems? Or would it be too much pressure for organs for detoxification?
I'd say in that instance, that's a very good question.
Because there's a case, even we don't know that we have problems. And so we can bring up something with too much detoxification for our organs. No?
So,
yes?
Yeah. First of all, I don't like the term detoxification. Okay? It's not. Xenogene is not a detox. Okay? So it enables cellular senescence. So it helps to get rid of those cells that are hanging around. They're past their usefulness, and it enables what the body would do anyway, which is that cellular senescence and push things through. But the notion that you shouldn't take something because you might, Xenogene's a great product, and I think that the cautions are always there, and we've kind of steered into this ground through the conversation now. We've had it around about fish oil, and now we're having it about underlying conditions. We're having about liver funk. Could this? And I genuinely find this really interesting, because if you were to just go about putting together a whole stock, whole food diet that had these active ingredients up, because they're all natural. Xenogene's a plus product. It's a naturally derived product. You could just go and eat this way. It's difficult, we know, but you could. No one at any point would intervene and go, should you do that? No one would. The minute you put it into a powder or a capsule or a pill, even though it's naturally derived, it's an all plus product, and the actives in it are all nutritional components, people start to go, well, what if? What if I've got this, and what if it does that? And this is true of balance oil as well. I'll come back to that in a minute. For me, the benefits far outweigh the potential risk. But if I had a diagnosed liver or kidney condition with Xenogene, I probably wouldn't do the spring clean, just because of the aggressive nature of how active that is with regards to the cellular senescence, and I would happily take a maintenance dose. I would see that as just a regular part of my daily diet with regards to that low-level enablement, just keeping things as inactive. That'd be the approach I'd take, genuinely. But I would not do the spring clean if I just thought I might have. Because I just don't think we can live that way. I just don't think that's a realistic way for us to live. And if you think for some reason you might, go and get that checked. That's the first thing you should do. If you've got some reason to think you might have an underlying condition related to this, go and get that checked. Go and speak to your doctor, go and have that kind of thing checked. But otherwise, you know, I've had this several times with doctors. So a customer or a partner said to the doctor, I want to take balance oil. And the doctor says, don't take an omega-3 supplement. And they'll come back and say, I've asked my doctor, he said, don't take it. I said, okay, ask your doctor, can you have a teaspoon of extra virgin olive oil every day? And they come back and they go, yeah. He said, that's great. Okay. Ask your doctor, should you supplement with vitamin D, particularly in the autumn, winter months? Is that safe to do? Come back, yeah, that's fine. Doctor says that's okay, great. Ask your doctor if it's okay for you to eat really good quality fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, tuna, most days of the week. Brilliant. Doctor says that's great. Then take balance oil. Because that's what it is. But it's like people have this funny approach. The minute it's in the bottle, and they go, yeah, don't take that. It's like this gross approach. So if you look at the active enablers that are in Xenogene, there are parts of the world that eat that way. There are parts of the world where those kind of curcumin, these kind of products that are part of how they make and prepare food. No one is going, is this safe? Should we ask the doctor? Tonight we're thinking of having a curry. We put pepper, we've put this pepper in it, there's curcumin, and the doctor's going, I'm not sure you should do that. But this is like the Western, the European mentality around food and food orientation. And it hits all of us. It does. For me, it's really simple. It's really clear. If you've got an underlying condition, you should for sure check with your physician and make sure that it's not going to have a negative impact on the condition or the medication that you're taking. If you suspect you've got an underlying condition, go and get that checked. We tell everyone, if you're not testing, you're guessing. We make certain tests available. If you really have a legitimate concern about an underlying condition, go and get that checked. The more you can learn about yourself, the better. But then remember this. We've got to a point in the world where when we get together and we discuss the active potential of whole foods and the benefit they can have on preventative health, we've got an underlying cynicism, and we have a concern about that. And that's not a good place. We need to sense check that. We need to go, how have we arrived here? Why do we think this way? Why have we built in suspicion around whole food and whole food derivatives and the preventative notion of living better, having a better preventative approach to owning our own health? Most of the foods and most of the supplements, in fact, all of the supplements that we provide are safe. They're safe, but more importantly, they're effective. We work with hundreds of thousands, approaching millions of people. Are we going to find individual cases whereby there's something of a low-level adverse effect? Undoubtedly. Because as the population expands, the probability and the possibility means that you're going to meet a complex case where things aren't as straightforward. But remember the bell-shaped curve, the 95th percentile, the 2.5 percentile either side? The vast majority of the people we work with, the vast majority, are solely going to benefit from what we do. And if in doubt, get a triple stamped assurance from the physician just on the condition. That's it.
Again, me, sorry. So, today we have balance test to prove that balanced soil works more than something else. Is Zinzina planning to create more tests to prove that Xenobiotic Extend and other products also work more than something else? Thank you.
Yes, but we don't do the test to prove it works. It does do that, but we do the test so you can see what your status is. And then once you've seen your status and you take the product, then you can reassess and see whether or not it's made any positive change to what you're doing. But I accept the point, but we don't do it to prove it. It does that, for sure. But we do it to empower people so that they can make a better choice. First choice is, do I need to take the product? What's your status? Do you need to supplement with omega-3? And then once you've started to do it, then you test to see, well, has it made a difference? But I agree, both of those prove what the product can do. And then the other part is yes. So we're working on a gut microbiota test so we can have a look at the impact of the xenobiotic. And we've actually, and the reason why I can't tell you is not to be all kind of mysterious, is because we don't want any of our competitors to get ahead of us. We spend a lot of time, money, and resource on research development. We want to innovate in the space. And if we lift the lid on what we're looking at, it enables someone else to go, oh, right, we'll try and do that. And so we are protective over it. But I promise you now, we've got 2 tests that are in a stage of development that we are looking to bring forward, let's say certainly within the next 12 months, that are phenomenal. Like genuinely phenomenal. Like so exciting that it's one of them when you think the unleashed potential of the one I'm thinking of most, which we're trying to have ready for annual event, to be honest with you, next year, is it's health game changing on a global scale, like you wouldn't believe. Yeah. It really is. It really is. And so, yeah, we want to be the #1 test-based nutrition company, and to do that, we have to have tests. And tests are a big part of our core concept, and we will never stop looking at how we can better evaluate, test, measure, monitor, feedback, and, yes, prove that what we do works.
Good evening. I have a question from Yelena. She asked if you're planning to let out some vitamins for the children if extend is too much. But it's her question. My question is about the tests. And I see that for our customers, they are colorful and they are easy to explain and so on. But my concern was for a medical record or GPs or I don't know cardiologists or someone else. Can we get like a report with the header of the lab and in the footer with the person who did it, like a regular blood tests we are having in the labs and so on, so it could be included in our medical record.
Yeah, so someone else asked that recently, and Emily's working on that. So basically, it's just admin. Is all it is. It's administration. Is getting the date, the lab certification, that kind of stuff added to the paperwork. We don't want to medicalize the feedback we give now, so it's kind of a case of that we'll be able to make that option available for people who ask for it. And it's just admin. So yeah, they're actually working on that right now. The problem we have is that, and I learned this when I arrived at Zinzino, when you make one change in one area, it brings about 500 changes elsewhere, because someone will go, well, that's great, you want to add that bit of paper, but to do that, it means we have to do this. So they are doing that right now, and for that exact reason, because people want to be able to have it match the standard of that. And then the other question, which is about the kids stuff, that's another big project for us going into 2023. So we launched the kids concept and we brought Tutti Frutti. It was just a flavor change and dosage recommendations, but that was just the start. We've got so many plans in that space with regards to what we want to make available for children. They're a huge interest for us, because if we can get it right from the start, we don't need to fix it later. So if you can empower children to be healthier from the start and avoid all the problems, that's real prevention. You can't be in the preventative health space and ignore children, because that's your best chance to prevent anything. So we're taking that space really seriously, and we've got some big plans for 2023 as to what we'll bring forward in that area. So yeah, for sure, for definite, yeah.
Thank you. What is your opinion about the impact of vegetarian and vegan diet and balance?
What was the last part?
What is your opinion about the impact of vegetarian and vegan diet on balance?
On balance, we have a vegan product, so my opinion is if you're a vegan or vegetarian, take the vegan product and be in balance. I'm not a vegan or a vegetarian, but I have vegan and vegetarian days. Most people consume too much meat. And to me, a plant-based diet doesn't mean you never eat meat. It means that when you start to look at your meals and your meal plans, I start from the plants. So I'll think about what kind of vegetables I want to eat, what's going to appear on the plate, whether it's going to be kale, spinach, what's going to be there. And then I'd say, and what type of protein? And when you take that approach, you don't always land at an animal protein. That's great, because it could be that you've got beans, pulses, legumes, nuts. There's all different places you can get a mix of proteins from. In a standard week, and I am a meat eater, there's probably 2 to 3 days of the week that I'll eat meat. If I'm going to eat any type of animal, I prefer to go to fish, in all honesty. But there are days when you would think I was a complete vegan or vegetarian. So for people who are a complete vegan or vegetarian, that's fine. You can be as healthy as anybody else. What you've got to realize is that sometimes, just based on food availability, it's more of a challenge. That's all. It just can be more difficult because of what's available. But that's improved a lot over the past 20 years. And for us in particular, when you look at what we make available, I've just 2 weeks ago just finished off our Vegan Society certification. That's all back in place and updated now. We have a vegan product which is for balance in itself. So we try to support and enable people to maintain their vegetarian vegan diet and be able to still enhance their diet through good nutrition by what we make available.
Thank you. Last 2 questions, okay?
Now everyone heard them say last 2, yeah? So count with me.
How, and there's going to be 1 question.
Oh, so this is big.
How could you explain that my husband...
Your husband? Every day's a learning day.
At some point got flatulence and uneasy stomach using xenobiotic. He used it already for a long time. After taking off xenobiotic, it went away. The same, my daughter, suddenly stomach ache after every meal.
It's interesting that I'd look at the specific timing of it and what it coincided with. And again, if you've been on product, everything's been fine, then suddenly it seems the product is implicated in increased flatulence bowel disorder. My first port of call is to go, okay, so you were taking it and everything was okay, and suddenly it changed. What else could potentially have changed? And I promise you, I've dealt with this so many times. People go, no, nothing. And then you sit down and you start going through something. Oh, yeah, well, actually, I did. And then I wasn't doing this, and I was under a bit more stress. And you go, okay. And then you start to see where the changes are. So, but the other thing it could be, if it is just the product, I'd be looking at was there a change in when you took the product, or did you have it closer to a certain type of meal? Because particularly if you were on it and everything was fine and suddenly there was a change, something has changed. So it's either when you take it, what you're taking it with, or something else has changed around it. And I'd look at those first.
Thank you. And last question would be, we have heard that we are on the way to see great cooperation with Lithuania's cardiological society with some specific Xeno and cardiologists' trial of balance oil.
Yeah, the research that went on in Lithuania with yeah, that's true. They're writing that report up. I keep asking them to write it quicker. I was in Lithuania. I was like, well, come on, when's this going to be finished and publish it? But I've seen the preliminary data. So the trial, I can tell you what the trial was now because it's all completed and they're just finishing off the analysis and writing up the paper for publication. So they were looking at whether or not taking the balance oil with hypertensive population either improved their symptoms, reduced symptoms, or reduced their reliance on medication. So they were the markers. It was a placebo trial, and the indications were really, really surprisingly good. Like, really surprisingly good, to the point, because you might not know this, but I'm actually quite cynical by nature. And my first question when I saw how good the findings were, I said, can I have a look at the method and the analysis, because this looks a bit too good. And so they sent me all that information across, and the method was intact. The scientific reasoning and rationale was good. And the analysis, I gave them a few little tips on the analysis from a statistical point of view, but the analysis was sound. And it is what it is. Measurable reduction in symptoms, measurable reduction in people having to take medications, types of medication. Some people in that trial went medication free. And that was the bit that made me go, hold on, because these are people with diagnosable hypertension. And some people in that trial went medication free. And this was a trial, by the way, that wasn't managed by us. All we did was give them the product. And it was a clinical trial managed by a group of cardiologists and clinicians in that region. They did it all themselves. Our only influence was to give them the product. So that's it. So yeah, phenomenal. And it's kind of...
Thank you.
On that, you know, sometimes when you kind of, you know what should happen, and then you get the evidence that it does happen, and then you go, all right. So they say, okay, so it did that, okay. So yeah, it was one of those moments, so it was good, yeah. But thank you very much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe you have some questions.
Yeah, my voice is about to give in. I've got no questions left at all. All I will say, and I say this on behalf of myself particularly, but then whenever I comment about anything like this, I am representing Zinzino as a whole, is that genuinely, it's not, I think the biggest crime we make is that we'll say Zinzino is on a mission to do this. And we need to change that across all of our literature. And it should just say, we are on a mission to do this. Because there isn't an us and them. There isn't Zinzino corporate and then people in the field, the partners and people making it happen. It is about what we're achieving together. And the reason I moved across from pure research into this type of role was because I knew we could make things happen far more rapidly and we could have an impact on people's daily lives from the word go. That we weren't having to wait 10 years for someone to benefit from something that we'd done. And none of that happens. I've done that part, did that for years. The part that's different now is the part that all of you do. So the last bit I'm going to say on behalf of myself, and I know I represent Zinzino, is thank you to all of you, because you're the ones who actually make the difference. We put all our effort and time and attention into making good products with reliable information. You're the ones who put all your effort and time and intelligence into making the world a better place. So thank you very much on behalf of myself and everyone at Zinzino for being the essential part in what we do. So thank you very much.
That's probably really the last question today, but...
Told you! One more.
Yeah, but I'd really like to know whether your colleagues in scientific field, like peers, or what would you call them, hadn't they said that now they've lost the reliability in you, that you joined a specific company? No?
No, it's interesting, isn't it? And I won't even pretend to say that I didn't think of that. Because when you're in a university full-time, and you all know this phrase, surely, like ivory tower. You're in this place that's it's so revered and looked up to, and you're in this place of authority, and what you say is seen as completely impartial, objective. But that's all nonsense. None of that's true. When I was at university, we did proof of concept and trials for some of the biggest pharmaceutical, sports, drinks, protein drinks companies. None of it's different. None of it is different whatsoever. But I think also, I was very fortunate. I'm quite, you might not know this, but I'm quite an uncompromising person in all reality. Particularly when it comes to science, I'm very uncompromising. And I've had some battles and challenges over the years with some big corporations. And actually, the response I've had from all my peers has been the exact opposite. They've been like, wow, if you're going to do that, it must be the real thing. So that's the response I've had. And all my friendships and colleagueships and partnerships and research groups, I'm still in part of them all. No one has seen that what I've done is like a step in the wrong side, the dark side. The exact opposite. And in fact, there's at least 30 of my scientific academic colleagues who now all take Zinzino products every day. So if anything else, it's gone the other way. Yeah. So no.
Thanks a lot.
No problem. I think on that point, though, it's interesting to note that science and academia has no problem with the commercial space. What it has a problem with is when people make fake information. And where someone's doing it right and doing it well, they want more of that. So when they see someone step in that direction, that to them is a win. That's like, great, we need more people to do that. And actually, I think the response Zinzino gets around the world from medicine, from academia, is unique. No other company gets the same response. Yeah.
Excuse me, the very last question.
She'll be ringing me up later.
What was your first balance test before taking Zinzino products?
You know what? I genuinely, I can't remember the exact number. I can't remember the exact number. No, I was one of those people who I was like irritatingly close, but still not there. If I remember rightly, I've got in my head at the moment 7.8 to 1. I've got in my head. It was around about that. It was around about 7.8, 7.6, something like that, to 1. So it was one of those people that I was like, oh, it's close, but still nowhere close enough. But the interesting thing for me, and what was going on at home, my wife, is that we'd been looking. So my wife had a number of health issues that were going on, and we knew that omega-3 deficiency was at the heart of it. And we tried all types of supplementation, and our diet had it plenty. So my score was an indication of what we'd done with our diet over a number of years. And so I'd got to that point just through diet, but I still wasn't where I needed to be. My wife, she'd had 3 children, far more stressful job, and she was dealing with all kinds of like symptoms that were clearly related to a pro-inflammatory state. And so when Zinzino popped up, and I was like, right, I'm going to start taking this, and we both did tests, and her score was like 27 to 1. And there's some good learning to be had from this, because we had pretty much exactly the same diet. I'm a bit more active, but we had pretty much the same diet. And I was like 7 point something to 1, and she was way high, 20 odd to 1. And the real impact of change of symptoms and how someone felt, the real dramatic stuff happened with Tracy. She was getting this low-level bruising, she was getting inflammation, difficulty sleep, like almost day in, day out. You just saw this continual improvement over days and weeks. You couldn't take it off and now. And for mine, it was far more subtle, but I started to notice 2 key things. The first one was sleep. So 2 or 3 weeks into taking, I was obviously closer to being in balance, sleep quality. And then 2 or 3 months in, and I've talked about this loads, with regards to my fitness and running, I just couldn't, I couldn't get tired. I would run, and no matter how far, I put it to the test one day. I don't know if I've explained this before, but I got to a point where I thought, I'm going to see just how far I can run. And I said to a friend of mine, I'm going to run, and I'm going to give you a phone call when I can't run anymore. So I want to see how far I can go, because I just can't get tired. And just over 6 hours, I had to get back for work. So I rung them up. I said, I'm fine. I could actually run back, but I haven't got the time. Can you come and pick me up? I just couldn't get tired. Just could not get tired. And so that was a big notice. That was a big change I noticed, was just this kind of endurance and recovery. I've always exercised every day. I've done that for a long, long time. And now when people will say, well, you run every day, and what they don't realize is I have no soreness ever. Every single day, it's not a problem. I just go for a run. It feels nice. It's a way to relax. I enjoy it. My recovery cycles are way within less than 24 hours. So it's just textbook. That's what we teach students, but most people aren't like that. So there are my scores. That's my story. None of that matters. It's all anecdotal. Only the science matters. So forget everything I've just told you.
Thank you, Colin. What I just learned, tomorrow after third question I will start this game. This is the last question because then it's really starting.
Yeah. There's one more, and then there's just the last question. And I'm gonna promise you something now. I've got to make it from here to that door, out, down the stairs. I guarantee there's more questions before I make that journey. I promise you. I promise you, someone will come and go, I didn't want to ask in front of everyone else. Promise you. Just watch if it's not you.
Thank you. Thank you,
very
Colin.
much. Thank you.
And see you tomorrow. Thank you.